David Lichtenstein, and welcome to the Yeshiva Shalmala. And this week we're going to be speaking about a topic, halachically and hashkafically, a new development that is really amazing. And what is that? Plague of the Agunahs we all know about. That you have people, and unfortunately in the last 2 years it's been in the post, it's been with the Einiklach of the biggest Rosh Yeshivas and Rabbanim, where the halacha is by get. A divorce can only be with the full will of the husband. According to the Rambam, it says imloy matzah. It has to be totally up to his desire. According to the Sefer Mitzvahs Ktanis, it has to be the kosavla out of his own volition. So the halacha is ein megarshin ela b'rtzayin habal. So that creates a power imbalance, and there are people, they abuse power. You see it all the time. That's what happens. A girl wants to get. The marriage is irretrievably broken. It could be years. And the boy just has hold-up power. And here's like a clip of we took a boy and a girl. And this goes both ways. The girl could have hold-up power because the boy doesn't want to get a hetzamei or rabbanim, even though it's more a drabanan. But listen, here's a one boy talking about his experience.
After the pain that I've been through for so long, 100,000,000%. I can't stress it enough. When I went through, my kids were literally taken away for 3 months. Could you imagine? I don't know if you have children. 3 months. I couldn't say hello. The accusations, all of a sudden, the community saying this and this about me because there was no rhyme or reason. Anyone could, and they had more money than me. They had prestige. They threw me under the bus, and the pain that I went through, I 100% would have my son, my daughter, and I would pursue anyone who I know to be able to do that. My friends, I have a lot of friends who went through similar situations, and they feel the same exact way.
Now, here's a girl who suffered. Listen to the girl.
My family was also very much groping in the darkness here. My kids were not even knowing what's going on. There was no money. Like, I was borrowing money from people just to help me get through this. Having a prenup, I would have had money for my kids. Having a prenup would have just taken care of this. It wouldn't have affected everybody the way it did.
And both of these had happy endings, I guess, in respect that both got divorces in the end. But we're going to be speaking to a girl today who's waiting almost 6 years already. And by the way, it's not from some guys from Zulik who learned in some, Fry Yeshiva. This is, the boy learns in Punovich, in Lakewood, etc. So you could be a victim no matter where the boy came from, or in the case of the girl, where the girl came from. So what do we do about it? We have sisters. We have daughters. We may be women. We have lots of women listeners. We get, right now we're up to 125,000 downloads a month. A significant amount of them are women. Well, you don't want to, chas v'shalom, ever be an Agunah. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wow, this is such a wild thing. I mean, it happens rather rarely, thank God, in our community. But can I ask you, on your home, do you buy fire insurance? You do? Well, most people do. Banks require it if you have a mortgage. What percentage of homes burn down? It's 1 out of 1,000. But you still have insurance. So the question is, why wouldn't you want to insure, on the very remote chance, hopefully, your own life, your daughter's life, your sister's life, especially when it doesn't cost anything? So until now, the only option has been the RCA prenuptial, which basically its goal was to get the couple in front of an empowered Beis Din as soon as possible. Because, if somebody moves out, and they want to go to Beis Din, you could do the Beis Din dance for 2 years or 3 years. I don't like this Beis Din, I don't like the other, I don't like this Sternbuch, and you get this tie-in, that tie-in. And this cuts out that entire thing. There's a Beis Din that was chosen, the Sternbuch, and basically whatever that Beis Din, you submit it to their jurisdiction. But Rabbi Sternbuch, and we will have him on the program, the Av Beis Din Yerushalayim, was very opposed to the RCA. Many Rabbanim liked it. We'll have Rabbi David Cohen, who says it's fabulous. And because of that opposition, and since Ishus is such a davar chamor, Safik Mamzeris, etc., Ishasish, Daraisis, Yichsin, it wasn't really accepted by most of the yeshiva world. So two Balabatim, Eli Goldbaum and Martin Fridelander, he's a lawyer, a matrimonial lawyer who's seen, unfortunately, so much blood in the divorce world, and Eli Goldbaum, they decided they were going to try to create a new type of prenuptial that's acceptable to the biggest, most, Rabbanim from the Yeshiva Shekreisen. And who signed off on it? Reb Shlomo Miller, Talmud of Reb Aaron, one of the Dayanim, eminent Paiskim in Lakewood. Reb Yankiv Forsheim, he is Beis Medrash Gevayas Paisik. His office is in the yeshiva, and he sits a whole day. When I was a Bachar, I used to bring him shilas. In the yeshiva, paskening shilas from Flatbush, Reb Hillel David, v'cheina, and they've come up with a new type of prenuptial. So we'll be interviewing Rabbi Avrohom Kahn of the Beis Din City. We'll be asking what is the difference between the new prenuptial and one of the RCA, and why doesn't this one have ma'arim? We will be just talking to a young woman, Nechama Esther Wassermann. She was married to this Panavisha boy, Beis Medrash Gevaya boy, 5-6 years already. She's trying to get her divorce. She's in Agunah.
It's been over 5 years, and I just want to be free. I'm not asking for child support. I'm not asking for alimony. I'm not withholding visitation. I just want to be free. It's been 5 years. I'm getting older, and I just want to move on and live my life happily without having to worry about this, without being chained.
And 5-6 years, when a woman has limited childbearing years, that's serious. Could be. We spoke to a woman. She's 13 years waiting. There's only 20 good childbearing years. So not only is it the pain of the family, but it's ritzicha of the family that could have been. Right? And isn't there a din of leisamay dal dam reyecha? We speak to Nechama Esther. I wanted to confirm her story, so we actually called her mother-in-law. She said the family backs the boy, they support the boy financially, etc. I wanted to make sure I heard both sides. And the mother-in-law, I spent 15 minutes on the phone with her. All she would tell me is, I shouldn't be Maitzi Shemra. So I said, Maitzi Shemra is on a davar that's not true. So I said, Mrs. Wassermann, I said, you're a mechaneches in Beis Rachel in Muncie. You teach Jewish children. I said, do you deny the fact that he had multiple siruvs from multiple bezdins? Do you deny that even the Beis Din in Muncie, where you live, is trying to get a hold of him? He won't answer phones. What is the Maitzi Shemra? Is any of this not true? She said it's between him and God and me and God. And I asked her, I said, if somebody's, that's a very Christian concept. By Christianity, that you have the Kitty Genovese story. Somebody could be killed in front of you, and a good Samaritan could walk away and is obligated to do nothing. Kitty Genovese is a famous story in New York where a woman was raped and killed, and supposedly 60 bystanders walked by. Halachically, when you see somebody running after somebody with a knife, you're not allowed to say it's between him and God. There's a chiv to be matzel, esamid al dam reyecha, right? And Chazal said not only that, but takonis hamatzel, anything he breaks along the way, he's pata, right? Ram at the end of Chayv Lamazik, Shulchan Aruch, the end of Chayv Mishpat, right? I said to her, that's not the Jewish way. Then I was curious, so she just wouldn't respond, and ultimately the conversation ended. That was that. It's between him and God, and me and God. So I called up the shul where they daven, and I said, how do you not? I spoke to the Rebbitzin. I said, how do you not do something? We don't want to get involved. I said, look, I know your husband. He's a Talmud Chacham, and I'm sure he could tell you Torah about there's a single woman. Is it Ishtay Kegufay, the Chiyav Neris, the Shia Chazaynish, and the Shemen, all these chumris, but when you have a girl suffering, she's in Agunah for almost 6 years, you don't speak up because you don't want to get involved? Is it a Christian shul, or is it a Jewish shul? And not only that, we speak so much about Das Torah, about Kavatar, if we don't empower the Dayanim that when they give a siruv as a community, if we don't stand up to such people, to the families, and say, don't come to shul, you're not Jewish, you're a Paisheya, we don't want you in our shul. So then we're basically disempowering, we're taking the pen, any ability to legislate out of our Rabbanim's hands. We can't, there's a din of Leisamid. We're going to be speaking to Rabbi Yosef Geenfield from Lakewood. I understand he is, when it comes to Shalom Bais, he is the go-to person in Lakewood. And he will speak about the rise in divorces and the importance of getting this new prenuptial, which she thinks is fabulous and would save so many people aggravation. So that is our topic of the week, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of angry phone calls, a lot of broken glass. But all I could say is, if you have a sister, a daughter, if you're a woman, and the price can come out and they say it's good and you don't get it, it's like buying a house and saying, or driving a car and saying, no, I don't need insurance because I was the best driver in my class, or I don't believe in fires and houses. And you really have to, I think it needs real consideration. If you're a father and you listen to the crying of this girl, really something amazing. Well, since I interviewed the mother, Rivka Wassermann, who's the Mechaneches from Bais yesterday, she obviously spoke to her son, and I got this email now from Dave Wassermann at oceansuppliers@aol.com. We'll put the email online. Good afternoon. I was notified that you're ominously planning to using your podcast as a platform to intentionally disseminate defamatory, capitalized, libelous, capitalized, and slanderous information, slanderous is capitalized, about me and my private life, which will undoubtedly have an irreversible and destructive effect on my children. I'm hereby informing you that aside from such action being illegal, it will also be violating a court order which specifically prohibits such action as written above. In any event, I advise you to refrain from unscrupulous mischief, and remember that the above is written proof that you were informed in advance about the actions described as, among other wrongs, being irreparably destructive to my children, illegitimate, and against the court order. Thank you, David Wassermann. So, I'm respectful to all emails. When I sent him back an email saying, please provide me a copy of the court order. I'm happy to interview, by the way, if you want to have another, say your side of the story, and I'll get it up before we go live. And additionally, could you please describe what is, quote-unquote, defamatory, libelous, and slanderous about saying that there are 2 siruvim against you? Is that untrue? That Rabbi Kahn has been trying to get you into Beis Din for quite a while? Is that untrue? Is it untrue that it's between 5 and 6 years that you've held your wife, a nice, wonderful Beis Yaakov girl, as an Agunah? Is that untrue? So please inform me. I have not heard a response. And I'll make a bet. I'm going to go live on the air with this. Haven't heard back from him. I'll bet you that there is no such court order. And it's a lie. And it's interesting that, David Wassermann is used to threatening people. He's obviously threatened his wife of, 6 years now. But, you know what, Dave? I'm not your wife. And you can't threaten me. And if you want to start up with somebody, start up with me. Starting up with Beis Yaakov girls, that doesn't take a lot. You want somebody to start up with? Bring it on. Because you know what? I know how to deal with cowards and bullies and people who attack innocent Beis Yaakov girls. I can do a better job of it. So bring it on, David. That's what I say. You don't have a court order. That's my guess. And you can't bully me. No, you shouldn't. You're not an example of Panovej. You're not an example of Lakewood. And no, your mother should not be teaching Jewish children. She should not be a mechaneches. Right? That's my opinion. Because we don't do this to Jewish women. We protect Jewish women. When the Chabdam Yosef Megufay, we're not ma'agin them. And you know that marriage, it's a Mekadesh Ama Yisrael de Chuppah v'Kiddushin. It's something. It's a Dava Kodesh, and we don't abuse it, and we don't use a get as a weapon, right? So everything you are doing is Shalai al pi Torah. It's Lo b'derech Yisrael Saba. So, David, if you have the court order, send it my way. Before we go to our program, I'd like to say a word. This is Ramban. Lama nisbacha parshas hanesiim leparshas menorah. You have all the parshas hanesiim we read every day. And then afterwards it says, Bahaloischa haneres. What does nesiim have to do with neres? Rashi's question. So Rashi brings, Kisharo arein chanukas hanesiim chol shadaitei. He said, all the Nesiim brought karbanis. And what, I'm nothing? But I'm Kind. What am I? I'm an adopted kid. He says, so Rabbi Shol told him, Shalcha G'dayla Misholahem. Yours, the Neiris is greater. Why? Shata Madlik Boiker of the Erev. So the Ramban asks a question. I don't understand. He was upset that he wasn't part of the Nesiim, so he got the menorah. He says, what's the council? And why the menorah? He got also Ketores. He got Hakravis. He has Kabbalah, Zrika. They have all the avoiders at the Beis HaMikdash. Why did he pick menorah? So Ramban says, you know why he brings a medrash? He says because the karbanis, the Beis HaMikdash, one day they will go away. They will be in this battle. They will be nignaz. But he says, Aval hanerais la'olam mul pnei menorah ya'iru. The neiros are forever. The neiros are forever. So he says, and that's talking about so the Ramban says it's talking about the neiros Chanukah, which are forever. So I have a question on the Ramban. I don't understand. It's like a bait and switch. He's saying, their avoid in the Beis HaMikdash was fantastic, the Nesiim. So he says, what do I get? He says, you get the menorah of Chanukah. He says, I don't want the menorah of Chanukah. I want the menorah of the Beis HaMikdash. I want Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. What do you tell me? Haneris la'olam mul pnei menorah yiro. That's a drabanan. It's not the real thing. It's like a bait and switch. Imagine, you send away for a Canada goose coat, and you get back made in China, goose-like. You say, that's not what I wanted. I wanted the real thing. It's like you order a rib steak, and the waiter brings you a burger. He says, it's like a rib steak. Come on. We know artificial flavor. That's not the real thing. What kind of teretz is this? And I think the answer is that when he says, Al haneres la'olam ya'iru, what's he telling you? He's telling us that when we light the menorah by our house, it's an extension of that menorah in the Beis HaMikdash. It can't be a different menorah, or it's not a solution. But Chachamim took the menorah of the Beis HaMikdash and they said, this menorah will go away, but we're bringing it into your house. Haneros la'olam mul pnei menorah iru. It's the same neiros. Imagine that. I have a friend. He did a big tova for Bells. So the Belzer Rebbe sent him a message to a shliach. Come to Bells. One of the biggest events in the year is Hadlakas Haneris. They sit in their huge shul, maybe 5,000 people, and they sing, and the Rebbe says, come, you will light the menorah with me. And this guy flew to Eretz Yisrael, and he says it was exhilarating. He stood next to the Rebbe when they lit the menorah in Bells. Wonderful, but you know what I would tell this guy? That's fantastic, but I have something else for you. Do you know that the menorah in your house, when you light it, you're doing the avodah of the Beis HaMikdash, that menorah is in your house. Go to the mikveh before you light the menorah. Right? You just lit the menorah. And this is another example how the Torah empowered every single Yiddelah. We spoke about Lahavdal of Avdalas by the Umes Olam, by the Christians, solo fido. Man's actions means nothing, just faith. By Khal Yisrael, every action. And you know what? You could be the Cohen in the Beis HaMikdash lighting that menorah. And you know what else? I'll tell you something else. That the Gemara says on the Hadlakas HaMenorah, Eidos hi l'boyolam shashchina shruya b'Yisrael. When they lit the menorah, it was testimony that the Shechina by Klal Yisrael. Gemara says that about the menorah. So I ask you, according to this Ramban, that la'olam haneres mul pnei menorah ya'iru. So the menorah in your house is an extension of that. Comes out when you light the menorah. You are also saying Eidos. You are testifying Shashchina Shribil because it's the same one. And do you know something that there's a shaila I had? By the bracha of the neiros, you have to stand because the Mechaber says, I think it's some involved, that every birchas ha-mitzvah has to be ba'amida. But Klal Yisrael lights also ba'amida, even though a menorah is supposed to be lamata me'asara. So why don't you sit down and light the neiros? And we don't do that. And a reason isn't given. And I would say maybe the reason is, if it's Eidos, if when we light, we're saying testimony, Eidos has to be Bamida, which is why, let's say, by Veichul Shemayim, most of the world stands, even though the Yekis sit by the second part, but for the Eidos part, Eidos has to be Bamida. You are testifying. And I'll tell you, I can say Derech Hamlotza, a cute answer. There's a Shiloh, the Rambam holds in Rambam Paskins that the Avodas HaMenorah is even a Zor could light the whatchamacallit, the menorah. Doesn't have to be a Cohen. And Raavad argues, but the Achrayim ask in the Rambam, if I follow the Rambam, they said a Zor could light the menorah. That's great. How is it Negeya? A Zor isn't allowed past Ezra's Yisrael. He's not allowed into the Bais HaMikdash. Chiv Karas. How is he ever going to light the menorah? Chab Sofer has a very cute thing. He says maybe you'll make a stick that's 30 yards long, like a bamboo stick, and use it with the sticks. It's like the Rambam, it's Negeya, which is a little bit strange. And I say that like this Ramban, I have a pshat. If every Yid in Shtub, his menorah, like the Ramban, it's the menorah of the Bais HaMikdash, so it had to be Mutter B'Zor, because it's not just Kohanim, everybody does it. So just think of the powerful empowerment that the Rabbi Shalom gives every Yid. You are the Kohen in the Bais HaMikdash, lighting the menorah, saying testimony. Mamish Gewaldik. Before we go to our guest, I want to ask the riddle of the week. Here's the riddle of the week. I know 6 cases, and we have a lot of Talmidei Chachamim, I'm sure I missed some, where you have the concept of Presumei Nisa. We'll start in Brachas. The Gemara in Brachas and Daf Yudal says, Kriyas HaMegillah is Presumei Nisa. Right? The same Gemara says, Halal ala nisim. Every time you say Halal, you're thanking God for miracles. It's Presumei Nisa, and therefore the Gemara says you shouldn't be able to interrupt Halal or Megillah because you don't interrupt Presumei Nisa. The Arba Kaisis is Presumei Nisa. We know Chanukah is Presumei Nisa. Ala nisim is Presumei Nisa. The Gemara in Shabbos says Amiras ala nisim. Sudas Purim, according to the Pri Megadim and many, is Presumei Nisa. 6 cases. But you never see those, it shows when you're a little kid, it shows a cow, a horse, and it shows a piano. And it says, which one doesn't fit? Well, which one doesn't fit? So the Rambam says, what's the din, the Ikka din of menorah, is Neir Ishu Beisai. What does that mean? 1 per household. Mahadran do many. I have a question. By Kriyas Megillah, is it 1 person should hear the Megillah for the whole house? By Arba Kaisis, it's also done in the house. Selabay Save Selabayis. Torah says Bayis. Right? Does the father just drink the Arba Kaisis, or does every single person have to do the Presumei Nisa? Sudas Purim, Kriyas Halal, Amiras Halanisim, right? Kriyas Megillah. All the other 5 cases, and every single Yachid, there's a din of Presumei Nisa. Kum the din for Chanukah, the Presumei Nisa of Zagamir, we say no, it's 1 person for the whole house. The Papa does it for the whole house. What's the difference? Why is the piano in the picture with the cow and the cat? Now, if you're going to want to say that the others are din gavra, and here it's a din chefts in the Bais, which I don't know why that would be. You would have to explain why. So let me ask you. It's similar to a mezuzah, you're thinking. So I ask you, then what's pasta din for Mahadran? How do you say Mahadran? If you imagine by Mahadran, if it's a din on the Bais that everybody, you would have 6 kids in the house, the 6 mezuzahs on the door. So first of all, why would it be mesukin and an oifin that's different? And if it is like mezuzah, so then what's pasta Mahadran if it's a din in the Bais? That is the riddle of the week. Let's go to our wonderful guests.
In America, the Agunah issue is such a painful issue. And unlike Eretz Yisrael, where the Rabbanim could take away people's passports and use all types of pressure, the Rabbanim here have very little, their hands are tied. So one of the few, perhaps the only solution that is available to us are the prenuptial agreements that the RCA has put into effect and that many people do use. So we would love to hear the Gaon's opinion about the prenuptials. And Because without it, it puts Rabbanim into terrible positions. For example, Rabbi Greenblatt, who officiated at the wedding of this quote-unquote Agunah, he just listened. When you hear somebody come again and again saying their hands are tied, their hands are tied, their hands are tied, he's an old man, and he's a gentle and a loving Rav, and their hearts melt, and they're put into a terrible situation. Would you would you say that they're doing the right thing with this prenuptial?
He had mercy on the woman, but that's no solution.
Correct. So the only possible solution that the Rabbanim in America are able to come out to heat on Bnei Yisrael who are being abused was the concept of the prenuptials, and they were saimich on the nesivis, and they were saimich on the marik, which the Ramah says that b'diavad you could use. Now, I know that the Goyen, the Raavad, is against it, but on the other hand, it's karev to pikuach.
But they had the prenuptial agreement?
No, they did not. But what the Rabbanim in America are telling people now is they're saying, we don't want any more in the newspapers where women come crying and they're saying that they're held hostages. So the solution going forward that they want to do is let's try the nesivis and let's try to be saimich on the marik, and because it actually causes people to leave Yiddishkeit when they say it's so abusive to women, and unfortunately you have a lot of prutzim, and I know
once you put forward this suggestion, there are a lot of cases which is not valid. Some cases yes, some cases no. As I told you, such a decision needs to be made by Gedolei Yisrael, which we haven't got today.
But it's a svek. We have the Ramah says
we're trying to make something new. All the generations they suffered from Agunas. Now we found a solution by the marriage to a state, what you said, prenuptial agreement. That's easy. We should be able to do it.
But why can't we be saimich on the Torah's Gittin? On the Nesivis was an Adam Ilan Rav we have in the Torah's Gittin, and it's karev to pikuach nefesh, where it's a mitzvah to be mishtadel in.
Huh? There's not any surim in the chap pikuach nefesh. He's pikuach nefesh not chak in surim. It's also.
But the Nesivis.
We will never be matter nesivis because of pikuach nefesh.
But the nesivis was matter this concept.
It's not sure always the nesivis was matter. Also, it wasn't matter like a tchila they do here.
I mean, the Ramah was matter at b'diavad.
Because in Yashar says in the Gedolei Yisrael acid, it's not so easy.
And the fact that I'm saying that the marik was materit, so a knas mammon b'diavad. You wouldn't be. I mean, the Taz in Shin Vav.
Whatever happens, what he did. He has to give it a get. That's sure.
Yeah.
After the child is Teshuvos.
And a Vlad Mamza it would be.
The Vlad Mamza there is the Vlad Mamza is the biggest child, because Vlad Mamza, even if he's an onus, also the Vlad Mamza. The Teshuvos is there. There's some possible say since she relied on the Rabbanim who did it. We don't say Teshuvos. She gives a get and get married again afterwards and finish. But the Mamza is certainly a Mamza. So, she was an Ishish, she was a child of the Mamza. The Mamza, even the person is an onus, they also become a Mamza.
So would the Rav say that the Torah's Gittin, the prenuptial, is usable in any circumstance?
What do you mean?
Would it be possible if there was a Rav who, an Adam Gadol Rav who personally oversaw in a particular case a prenuptial, would it be possible to is there any possible eitzah to avoid these cases of old Agunas we have here in America?
The Agunas are not only in America. The Agunas is not in America. Agunas have always been in old times, always. It's not in America, the Agunas. The Jewish law allows, in certain cases, a woman is an Agunah. That's what the Nechama they wanted, whatever happens. Sometimes the woman gets married, and the day after the marriage, she finds out afterwards he got an illness, a cancer. She lives the whole, has to live with him. She won't divorce him. That's her life. Everybody's got their own life. Some women can't get married at all. So what can they do?
Okay.
We have to try what we can. And that's it. We strive. Every Agunah, we try to be matter as much as we can. If we can't, we can't.
We're sitting here with Morenu Harav Hagayin, Reb David Cohen of Yaavetz, and we're here to talk about a very serious and sad situation that afflicts not only our community, but unfortunately many of the communities in the world today, and that is the refusal of recalcitrant husbands to give gittin to their wives. And seemingly from halacha, even though this happened occasionally, it's become the equivalent of a magefa over the last number of years. And I'd like to ask the Rav, are there any halachic eitzes for these what have become in effect agunas?
None that I know of, that we can do the regular halachas of kfiyah that are in Shulchan Aruch, because generally speaking, it's very difficult to go into the sugya of kfiyas haget. The only thing we can try to do is to, as the famous story goes, I can't tell you whether it ever happened, but there are those who tell stories, and they explain how stories are important. That the Seder Hadairis and the Shagasaya was supposed to have had a debate as to how can one argue with the other, and the Seder Hadairis said, well, through my work of Sipurim, I'm going to see to it that, like you're claiming that your Sefer is one where you're showing that like Tishtakach Torah Yisrael, I will bring about that there will not be any reason for Yisrael to want to forget Torah, because they'll have a great cheshik to learn Torah. The only thing I could possibly see is what the RCA has suggested, which is very difficult scientifically to prove that it has accomplished. It makes sense that it does accomplish, that the Baal makes himself his chayvus, that he will go to Bezdin and that he will pay an enormous amount of money per day for mizonos leishto. So his being recalcitrant and going to the Bezdin at least will cost him, and it's a regular contract as far as being enforced in the secular courts is concerned. And as a result, at least he'll go to Bezdin and will be able to get a psak Bezdin against him. And then he may, as a result of having this psak Bezdin against him, will feel encouraged, let's put that in quotes, to give a get. That is one of the ways that we can try and work it out. I think a second thing, which is not that much halachic, is public opinion. Many people, there are people that are not influenced by public opinion, but there are many people who are, and public people have to get involved. People have to feel that they can't just say shalom alai nafshi. People have to get involved and feel that the situation is one which could always happen to them. Chalila, it should happen to anyone, but people have to feel that way, and they have to get involved, and even if they're close friends of the husband, they have to hear the other side and encourage this thing, if only for the Chil Hashem, and I'm not using that word loosely. I know that nowadays they have signs of Isa Chomer that if you don't put the Seforim back into the shelves after you finish learning it, it's a Chil Hashem and Isa Noirad Miyoid Miyoid. But this word has been overused, but it really is a Chil Hashem in the eyes of non-committed Jews, where they, according to them, this is Teiras Chaim, where a woman has to suffer in a marriage that she doesn't want to be a partner to. That's Chil Hashem. that we know we have a Torah's Chaim, we live with a Torah, and the Rabbi Yerushalayim, as the Mesilas Shalom said, "Lai nivra adam el hisaneg al Hashem," not to be full of pain one's whole life. Is this the Torah? Is this a Torah's Chaim that a woman has to be tortured this way, that she no longer can have a wife, a life? It's absurd, and people must get involved. That we must have that thing.
So the Rav suggested that the RCA prenuptials then, which are based on the Nesivis, they're based on the Nesivis.
Well, I know that Gedolei Yisrael, I remember it's Rav David Bleich, I think at the inception of when this problem was being dealt with, I believe he was the one who suggested it. I don't know about the various sources that were used. I know Rabbi Nechama Goldberg was supposed to have been involved. So we have Gedolei Yisrael put together this document. It's not taking off in the what we would call the Chredische, Yeshivische, and Chasidische community. I don't know why. It's not taking they're very hesitant in signing it, but when I'm asked whether they should sign it, I said I can't see any reason why they shouldn't. It's valid, let's put it that way.
Is there really any reason, though, after a marriage has been irrevocably broken, to be ma'agin an isha? Or is there chakis arbeinu tamar, loy lisa v'litani mai, loy lamo as benaiter? When a marriage is irrevocably broken, is there any reason? Let's say she was a klafta. Let's say she was mamish azay from.
There is a reason. There is a reason. If perhaps, we have to be civil for a Baal when the woman keeps the children for herself and doesn't let the father see the children. And there was a case many years ago in Eretz Yisrael. She was an Agunah for 18 years, and the Bais threw their hands up and they tried to coerce her that she should, so to speak, share the children with the husband. She refused.
So would that be the one exception?
I can understand it, yes. It's hard to think of another exception, but that would be the only one. And only when you feel you can accomplish something. Once it's done and the children are estranged and they're grown up and they're estranged. In other words, they've accepted all the things that mother told them about father, and you feel you can't accomplish. Then I would say the Baal should give a get, because that is just revenge.
So you hear many of the women in these, sadly, of these agunas, and they say that the halacha isn't helping them. And how is it possible, that there's no answer halachically?
It's a good question.
Well,
it's a good question. I don't have an answer, but you see, the problem is this: it's not Judaism, it's not the Torah, it's the achzar, it's the husband who's an achzar. So he's the one who's making a Chal Hashem. So people say it's the Torah. The fact that the Torah said that a woman needs a get, and if she doesn't get it, she cannot remarry, that's a Torah's Chaim, and we understand it very well in the psychology of a woman can only be attached to one husband, even though as far as the Din Torah is concerned, a husband can have many wives before having a Gershom, which is not the way Western thought has it. Eastern thought agrees with it. Psychologically, it's not an evil thing, and in fact there are communities where there are no unmarried women because of that. We can rationalize that quite well. The problem is that the individual Jews are the ones who are Rishoyim, not the Torah. So the Russia. So we have to do whatever we can that there shouldn't be Rishoyim around, short of killing them. We can't.
Thank you very much. That was Moreinu Agoin, Reb David Cohen of Gvul Yaavetz. Thank you very much, Reb David.
Thank you for inviting me, Kultiv.
Joining us from Lakewood, New Jersey, we have Rabbi Yosef Geenfield, who's a Yedid, Ben Yedid. His father, Slangi Yarin, was for many years by Meshver in Beis Shraga Rebbe. They were very dear friends. My mother-in-law, Zecharon Levracha, was very close to his mother, Zecharon Levracha. He's a Rav in Chestnut in Lakewood, New Jersey. and he's one of the leading experts in Shalom Bais in Lakewood for many years. He teaches Chassanim for more than 20 years. He appears very frequently in Beis Din in the divorce process. He tries to lead people through this in the best possible way. Welcome, Rabbi Yosef.
Shalom. Welcome.
Rabbi Yosef, I understand that you are a champion of the RCA prenuptials.
So this prenuptial that Ali Goldbaum has been working on together with Rabbi Miller for so long. So it's their own prenuptial. They came off of an idea that was there from the RCA, but this I think is a unique. That you have to speak to Ali, but I think this is a unique prenuptial agreement that they put a lot of keiches into to cover a lot of different facets that people should be comfortable with it.
And have you asked people to sign it? Like, have you seen its effect?
Yeah, I did even have it. We had one couple that lived by us that got remarried, and they actually didn't want to go into the next chasana until they had some sort of prenuptial agreement, just because of their both had terrible experiences the first time, and Baruch Hashem, they're happily married. So we actually went through it, and they actually used it.
And do you have other people? Do you encourage people to use it?
Yeah, I definitely mention it to people. We're not pushing it to anyone, but I'm telling them that it's available, and I'm explaining to them why there's a lot of benefits and a lot of milas if they would use it.
So, Rabbi Yosef, make believe I was a chassan. I came to you, and I came with my Khal. We said, "Oh, Rabbi Yosef, we're getting married." What would you tell us?
So usually if I'm speaking, it's usually if I'll try to convince somebody, it's when they bring it up, when they have things that they're nervous about. I won't just walk in, any chassan walks in and tell them, only because at this point it's not something that everyone's doing, so I'm not going to go give them ideas to do connected what most people are doing. I went around with Eli to speak to different Rosh Yeshivas and different people to try to make it part of the normal everyday society. And when a guy comes in and tells me that either his sister, his brother, somebody went through a divorce and they're very worried about it, so then that's when I usually bring up this idea. That's when I usually talk to them about it. When there are things that they're starting with that they're very nervous about, and they tell me they're worried before they even start, so I'll bring up this idea. I don't bring it up, as a whole to everyone. Just right now, we'll bring it up to people that show some type of concern.
What do you say? So what would you tell them? Hi. So, yeah, I'm very worried. My sister-in-law went through a very bad divorce, and now I'm getting married, and, I'm fresh out of, marriage Yisrael. So what would you tell me, Rabbi Yosef?
The first thing I would do is I try to calm them down and explain to them why, just because one person went through a divorce, there's no reason for them to be worried. That's the first thing I'll do. Once we got past that stage, I mentioned that most times the bite of the divorce, most times what makes it so uncomfortable is not the parting ways. What makes it so uncomfortable is the fights that go on, the bad feelings that you walk away with, the bashmutzing, and a lot of that comes from the fact that there's no trust, and everyone's scared. Everyone's good people. Most people, I'm saying against everyone, but most people are good people. They're not looking to hurt anyone else. They're not looking to bashmutz anyone else, but they're looking to protect themselves. And therefore, there's a lot of not trusting, especially if we're going into such a situation and each person realizes that the other one may be the one to not trust them. So automatically what starts happening is people go into protection mode, and then they do things which can make the other side get very nervous and react, and before you know it, they already created a whole situation that can be a big fight, and there's sometimes no going back. Sometimes actually this fact that you have a prenuptial and that people know where to go with it and know how to deal with it, how to deal with going through a stage that most people don't have training for, most people don't know where to go, they're going to be much calmer. They won't end up doing things that rates on the other person, but more than that, they themselves will end up in a better situation. Number one is, sometimes we'll end up...
You're saying it creates a process. Without it, there's no process. It's sort of a hefgewelt. Everybody's running to protect themselves. They're grabbing bank accounts. They're grabbing the silver, the ring, the this, the that. They're yelling, they're screaming. Suddenly, there's a process in place. There's an argument. We go to this Bezdin. The Bezdin is experienced. It's not a hefka. So you're saying it creates a process.
Right, and one more, right, 100%. But one more thing is that one of the big in-style things are people, there's a million yoyetzim around you, and each one has an idea from one situation, and very often the person gets an idea, put a restraining order, and of course that no one likes to have that, and that becomes a wild situation. Sometimes somebody's suggested leave your house, run away, and no one wants that. So I want to bring out one more point, that sometimes it's actually going to make that we can bring them to Shalom Bayis, because something goes wrong and someone's going through something, and at that point they're in a terrible situation in their marriage. Because there's no fights and it's done with this process and it's done b'shalom dik, so now they don't have the bad feelings. And at one point, all of a sudden, they start thinking, no, maybe at least for a second marriage, it's still a good option, and they end up back together. And in other words, even without this prenup, when things stay b'shalom, that happens very often. So this is not just that for people who want to get divorced. This is really for somebody who wants to ensure that it doesn't go into unnecessary divorce also.
It doesn't become ugly. And you're saying
Right.
that we had on, a few weeks ago, we had on about Tayanim, and while there may be good Tayanim, we had on, 2 Tayanim we thought were very respectful. But we also heard about Tayanim, that the first thing they tell you when you get divorced, or there's a problem, is say your spouse is molesting the children. And they start giving these, they make, let's face it, they make a living by spending lots and lots and lots of time in Dinei Torah, not by having couples get together. So you're saying that by creating a process by an impartial party who's not paid to create machlekes, it could actually prevent divorce.
Right, correct. Just on what you were saying, just to quote Rabbi Gissinger, Olav Shalom, he always used to tell me, he says, abuse is the most abused word. As soon as you start claiming abuse and all types of things, and it creates a whole big war and a whole big fight, and then all of a sudden, no one can look at each other. So I see it very much as a tool to keep the peace. And then if Chas v'Shalom it does go to divorce, which nobody ever wants, but if it does have to, the fact that it's b'shalom, first of all, makes it that 2 people can get remarried afterwards. Everyone wants to know what happened. Did they act menschlich? Did they not act menschlich? Were they understanding to each other? And when they hear that it was a peaceful situation, then the big question is why they got divorced. But besides for that, if there's a good reason for them to get divorced, so the fact that it was peaceful gives that they could each get remarried in most situations. If there are children, they don't become ping pong balls and they don't become being used in this process. Another thing is, I'll give you just a situation where a lady wanted to move things along. She had no way to move things along, so she moved out. So now it ends up her husband's in the house. She moved into a place where she doesn't have the proper furniture, doesn't have what her kids need, so her kids are very uncomfortable being by her. She's trying to be responsible, but they keep wanting to run to the husband because he's in their house with their friends and their neighbors, and she doesn't even have the basic, things that they're used to. So the fact that there's a process that we need to go through will probably end up that the right people are in the right places, that where they're comfortable and they're able to move forward in a healthy way with their family.
Right. In other words, one of the great problems with divorce, you're saying, is the emotions and the kas and words that are said in anger and the turbulence, and again, putting process to it could prevent a lot of what do they say? Achrei kas bo acharata. After we say things, we regret them. So, but I'm curious, as somebody who's been involved in Shalom Bayis for, you say, decades, is divorce rising in our community? This is just as a social aside.
To me, it seems like it really is. I don't know if it's just that I'm more involved, so I'm seeing more of it. And also today, the way the media goes, everyone knows everything about everybody. Things aren't, something happens locally, everyone in the world knows about it right away. So I don't know if that's what it is, but to me it definitely seems that divorce is happening, quicker, and people are faster to jump to it, and people have less of the attitude, let's work on it, let's make it work. It's like, either we'll make it work or we'll get divorced. That's the attitude more than it's going to work.
Why is that? What's changed?
So, first of all, I believe it became more, so to speak, accepted. People don't feel as embarrassed. A big part of getting divorced is the embarrassment. The guy or the girl now has to go face the world like I'm a failure and I didn't get the job done. I couldn't stay married. And the more they're socially accepted with it, so it's not so much that they're so worried about that. That's one thing that I believe changed. Another thing is also people have less stamina to work on things. In other words, we live in a society that something breaks, you throw it away. People don't put their koiches into and say, I gotta fight this, I gotta make it work, and have that fight that people used to have. That, at least from what I see, where it's like, this is working, and I'm going to turn over the world. If it means turning over myself, turning over whatever it means, getting to the right people, and I'll do it. People are faster to give up. Okay, it didn't work. I tried.
Rabbi Yosef, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Joining us from New York, we have a young man, Reb Nosson, who went through a divorce, and we would like to ask him a few questions as he could share with us what benefit a prenup could have played. Welcome, Reb Nosson.
How you doing, David? Okay, so I got married at a young age of 22 to a girl from a prestigious family, yichus, money, and after 4 years of marriage, a few Rabbanim decided that it's time for us to get divorced, hearing my wife's side at the time. And there was really, I've never had one opportunity to speak to the Rabbanim to say my side of the story. And before I know it, the kids were taken out of the house late one night, and I was basically sent home to my parents without even hearing my side. It was a stressful time in my life, and for 3 months I was not able to see my kids. And every time I said, could I please see my kids, there was no one there to talk to. I had no one to even talk to, and eventually we had some mediation that got involved, and things took a really long time, about, I would say, a year and a half before anything was put in place. Looking back, if I had the prenup, those pain and that hurt from not seeing my children for three months, didn't see my kids. My son, when he first said, he said, Tati, where were you? Where were you? If there was a prenup in place, the pain for the children and for myself would have not been there at all. And I can't stress that enough.
Reb Nosson, do you think that if you took your average yeshiva boy, he's 22, 23, 24, most of the yeshiva boys, haven't really had much interaction with girls, if you went to the yeshivas that I did. And now you say, okay, you're getting married, you're going to the chuppah, it's all exciting. Wait, could we sign a document? What happens when you want to get divorced? Do you see that as like sort of throwing like a cold blanket onto the whole, simchas chasen v'kala?
When it comes to ksuva, what are you going to say? Ksuva is exact same thing, just more, it's from the olden times. So it was accepted from day one. You're going to have a ksuva, the chazanish, how many zuz. It's great, but you don't have you have the same thing about a ksuva. You're going to say we shouldn't do a ksuva because, it's pre-negotiated and, I would. What about the ksuva?
I think the ksuba is in effect the prenuptial. Gemara says in ksubis shlei kal bein of loitzia, and it does set penalties for a thing. But I would just say that even though halachically we do have it's over 2,000 years the concept. I mean the mandiyom ksuba midaraisa could go back, it could go back since the Torah, right? Sure. But I think that it's become sort of like an unthinking document at this. But people, let's face it, if they would read the Ksub in English by a majority of weddings today, people would start laughing.
For sure.
That I have to support, But bringing in a new instrument, which is called the prenuptial agreement, right? I mean.
So no, David, I actually think I hear your points, but again, I'm not a Rav, I'm not the Rabban.
I'm asking you, if you, God willing, you'll be successful, you'll have children, and you'll make money, and your son will come, he's marrying Razy, and you're much wealthier than Razy. Would you feel comfortable asking your son to tell his Khal, look, I want to sign a prenuptial agreement that, look, my father's has a tech company. I don't want you to have any rights to it. I don't want you to have any rights to our Yerusha. Would you be comfortable negotiating that, asking your son to negotiate that before the marriage?
After the pain that I've been through for so long, 100,000,000%. I can't stress it enough. When I went through, my kids were literally taken away for 3 months. Could you imagine? I don't know if you have children. 3 months. I couldn't say hello. The accusations, all of a sudden, the community saying this and this about me because there was no rhyme or reason. Anyone could, and they had more money than me. They had prestige. They threw me under the bus, and the pain that I went through, I 100% would have my son, my daughter, and I would, pursue anyone who I know to be able to do that. My friends, I have a lot of friends who went through similar situations, and they feel the same exact way.
Okay. Well, Nassim, thank you very much. I wish you much hatzlacha. And Gadol yeh kvod Bais Hasheni mi Bais Harishon.
Amen, amen. And yes, I am remarried, and my wife signed the prenup with me, and she's really happy. And she actually was pushing me to do it because she knows about all the pain that I went through, and we spoke about it before the marriage. And she's thrilled with everything. She's actually last night we were walking in Manhattan near the Chabad with the ice sculpture menorah, and she said to me, she's like, Reb Nassim, I'm so happy we signed the prenup because I might make a lot of money one day.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
Joining us from New York, we have two members of the Yashar coalition, Eli Goldbaum and Martin Fridelander. Eli is a balabas. He davens by the Boston Rebbe. They decided to, as a skadim of the tzibur, to create a prenuptial that is different than the RCAs, because the RCAs did have critics of it, such as Moshe Sternbuch, etc., Rabbi Schlesinger, and other Rabbanim. They decided to create something that was crafted in a way that would be acceptable to basically the majority of the Rabbanim in Klal Yisrael. In fact, we had on before, we said we had Rabbi Forsheimer is maskim to it, and he's certainly preeminent Dayan here in America, Rav in America, Paisik. We have Rav Shlomo Miller, Talmud of Rabbaran, etc. We had other prominent Rabbanim. And joining us as well is Martin Fridelander, also a member of the Yashar coalition. Martin is a Talmud of Tarvadas. He's a Musmach of Rav Palm. He's a Talmud of Judge Sunshine, who I believe is the senior matrimonial judge here in New York State. Welcome, Eli and Martin.
Thank you very much. I just want to jump in for a second. Rav Hillel David is someone you left out in the introduction. Rav Hillel David is not someone who signs haskamas easily, and is also been very involved with giving us haskama and been involved with the preparing of the agreement.
Yes, Rav Hillel David is mishpacha with me. We're very, very respected Rav, brother Rabbi Yonason and Mendel David, one of the big Rabbanim and Flappers. So let me go straight to the heart of it. The RCA prenup has been around for some decades, and it's been was criticized. And the critique that Moshe Sternbuch writes in the Teshuvos Hanhagas, he says that it's basically, he sees that the $150 a day, basically the way it reads is that if the couple have a disagreement, and one of them believes that the marriage is irreparably harmed, and they want a divorce, and the other party does not agree to go to a bezdin who's in advance written down. It could be the RCA or any bezdin of their choice. Then a penalty of $150 a day begins to tick, and it's not called really a penalty. It says that the husband would support his wife with mezainis of a minimum of $150 a day, and they don't see that as a penalty. It's basically the ksuba is mechayev him to feed his wife. So here he's just it's being done. The number is being thrown out in advance. And Sternbuch said basically that the concept of a knas is debated in machlokes. The Ramah says it's permissible. The Ramah, I believe it's in Kuf Lamed Daled in Even Ezer. But the Pesach Tshuva already there brings many achronim who disagree, and they argue on the Ramah, and great achronim like the Mishkenes Yankif and the Michtav Melio, etc., etc. And then they say, but additionally, not only the Ramah, but even if you're machmir, not like the Ramah, the Torah's Gittin, the Nesivis, has a different side. He says the way to do it is, he has a very clever concept in Nesivis, and he says, if a wife decides to make her husband really miserable, would you consider that a forced get? A guy marries a real, she says, I'm going to make his wife, obviously it would not be a get musa, a get created by force. He says, so I'm going to create a mechanism where in effect we make the marriage so miserable that the husband wants to give a get. Right? And so they say, the Rabbanim say that even according to the Ramos, as a knas is, he says, here we're not creating a knas. What we're doing is we're creating a high standard that the husband has to support the wife. And by doing this, it's not a get musa. And we're not going to get into all the intricacies of this. Suffice to say that Rav Sternbuch and other Rabbanim critiqued this and said it has a din of a get musa, and it's a suffix eishesish, suffix banu el mamzerim, etc. So this is a new format of the RCA prenup, or it's basically a different format. So my question to you is, you both learned in yeshivas, you're both Talmidei Chachamim, you're B'nai Torah. What has the new prenup, which is getting the haskam of all these Rabbanim, done to avoid the critiques of the prior prenup?
Let me just, this is Martin Fridelander. Let me just tell you, I think to start the answer is to give a history of how Yashar came into being. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was approached by a prominent Orthodox professor who said that it's time for the right-wing Haredi community to have a prenuptial agreement that would be acceptable due to the fact that there was a large segment not using the RCAs. And I said to him then that I'm willing to put in all the time and effort, but I want a broad-based haskama, that this is not something to just put another one in. It would be something that the Rosh Yeshivas and Rabbanim involved would universally accept. And at that time period, I was in court in Brooklyn on a case that was in process of being transferred to the Beis Din, and I informed the judge that I needed about a week to 10 days to finalize a shtar brurin. These people want to go to Beis Din, and I just need to have the proper document. Could we push it off for a week and 10 days, and by that time we would have it in place? And I got it, and the law secretary was walking me out of the courtroom and said a derogatory comment, I'm not going to say exactly what, about, are you sending them to a Beis Din that does X, Y, and Z? And that was where the concept came from of how we're being viewed, and that we needed to put in an environment for conflict specifically in regard to divorce and custody. And that's where we started putting together the group of both mental health professionals, Rabbanim, other legal scholars who have helped us with this, and going to Rav Miller, who spent an enormous time with us, going through each word of the document to make sure that halachically it would be acceptable. And there's a more broader base here. In other words, the timing, I know the question was specifically how do we deal with what the RCA, but our concept is much broader based. The concept that you have to go within 2 weeks to a Beis Din gives the possibility of shalom bayis, that if we get into the issues very quickly, there's a huge possibility of getting the couple back together again, getting them the right help. And if you have time, I'll tell you a story where I did that in a case.
But Martin, so let's go to the beginning. Give us the bullet points. What are the bullet points of the new prenup that Rabbi Miller agreed to?
Okay, the bullet point is that there is no zabla. You have
many of our people do not know what a zabla is. Explained.
Okay, a zabla bezdin is a bezdin that each side picks their dayan or their borer, depending, and the two pick a third. It's a put together bezdin that's done for that specific case, as opposed to ours, which requires a sitting bezdin. And we also have a mechanism knowing that, a young couple who's signing a prenuptial agreement, that bezdin, is not in effect or in existence 20, 25 years later, we have a replacement Vaad.
I'd like to jump in for 1 second, if I can. This is Eli. To discuss that point as Zabla, I think that it would be helpful to the listeners to understand what is currently happening in many of the divorce cases and what was done to make sure that that doesn't happen in the future or to minimize that with the prenup. So typically when a couple starts with issues, what is happening currently, and we hear this time and again, people that get involved, whether they're Rabbanim, lay people, it could be myself, you hear one side of a story, you don't hear the whole picture. We get a community, and we're a wonderful community. We have a lot of people that know people, and sometimes these people get involved and make a mess out of the case. What typically happens is that if there was a chance of shalom Bais, all these people getting involved just took that opportunity away, and that happens in so many cases. David, who was involved in the structure of the prenup as well, Vashalim Miller was the one who spent hours and hours with us. After he finished, he sent us to David, and honestly, we didn't expect to get Haskama because he doesn't write Haskamas. Not only did he write Haskama, he wrote a beautiful Haskama. And he worked with us as well, together with Rabbi Gansweig, who's the Mashgiach and MTJ, together with Rabbi Forsheimer, to go through the issues of the prenup, to go ahead, and Rabbi David told me, I believe we will save a lot of marriages, and I think that's a very important point for people to understand. When you have a healthy way to deal with the divorce or the separation or the conflict is probably the best word, you will have people going to a bezdin who has a responsibility to try and make sure that if there is a possibility to keep that couple together, that is the first and foremost thing to do. But until now, just to understand what we were talking about, this Abloh concept. What happens is whoever decides to initiate the divorce will typically go to a bezdin and serve a hazmana, which is a summons to bezdin, to the other side. What generally happens is the other side goes, and certainly if they want to fight, they're going to find another bezdin, which is potentially a bezdin that is not of the highest quality, and something that the first side would never agree to. And then, since that is a right in bezdin, they end up saying, okay, so I don't want to go to your bezdin, you don't want to go to my bezdin, so we end up choosing each of us a bayer, which is our person who will represent us at the Zabla, and the two bayerim choose a third person who ultimately is the one who makes that decision. So that has caused a huge amount of problems within the current system, and that is what we're talking about within our agreement, that you waive that right to Zabla, and it must be a sitting bezdin.
So is it fair to say, and I'm going to offend some people when I say this, that a Zabla is sort of like going to Machne Yehuda to get your argument resolved? It becomes this huge bargaining sessions with Toyanim, each picking their favorite Dayan, picking their favorite Dayan. It smells of cronyism, of bargaining, of marketing. It certainly doesn't have the august and austere feeling, of like Kim Yosef Badas Khal, that is an unbiased, not necessarily profiteering group that is adjudicating this machlokes. Is that fair to say?
Not only is it fair to say, I'll join you in that exactly what you did say, at the expense of potentially making issues with people in the world, because it is a charade.
It's just a shook. It's like let's have a disagreement and go to Machne Yehuda and decide, with a lot of screaming and yelling and drama, how to resolve. And when there's, either, certainly children's lives, parents' lives, women's lives, men's lives involved, it doesn't feel like a very good way to go about this. And I would point something else out. Martin, when you were leaving the court and you told the Bezdin, I need a week to sign Shari Berurin, I was just laughing. I was thinking, I've seen Shari Berurin take 6 months to get agreed on and negotiated.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, when I'm involved, I don't, I had the court on top and there was a conference. But
getting the Shtar Berurin, it could take a year to get a Shtar Berurin. I want this line, I want this, I want that. Whereas if you do the prenup, the Shtar Berurin become a non-issue because it's all been decided in advance.
That's right. Lawyers have ethics that they have to follow. We wanted to put that in on the Tayanim as well, that the Bezdin has a right and they have to sign the protocols to accept their conduct before the Bezdin.
And what are the protocols?
Well, it's quite extensive. It's on the website, but obviously...
Give us a few of them. Give us some of the key points.
Well, I think the conduct is screaming, the professional language, the mannerisms that are used in sometimes an unprofessional way in the Batei Dinim, or the horror stories that people hear, those are not going to be allowed. And the Bezdin will have the power to say, you're in violation, you're out.
Okay,
you can get
fabulous.
somebody else.
Fabulous. Okay, I have to tell you, what you're doing is amazing. It's really just amazing, an amazing Taiva Satzibur. What's the third point?
Let me just jump in for 1 second because I think it's important. I know you've spoken about the concept of Tayanim. I will tell you that every Rav that we have met, Rosh Hashiva Rav, and there have been a lot, have all said we would like to have the Tayanim out of the agreement. The reason that we've kept it in is to allow it to be a universally accepted agreement. There were some women specifically who felt that a woman going into a Bezdin without representation of a Tayan is something that's potentially dangerous.
Yeah, the Shulchan says, right? Yeah.
I know. I've listened to some of the podcasts. I've heard the back and forth on that. What's interesting is that if you wish to choose a Bezdin that does not allow Tayanim, or if you wish to go ahead and say, or your Yeshiva, your Rebbe, whoever it is, says, we don't want Tayanim, you have that right to put that into the agreement. So it's really at the point of signing the agreement that either side could choose if they want to go without Tayanim, kol hakavod.
So there's a multiple choice sort of box. I went Tayanim and not in it.
It's a blank that you put in, you designate the Bezdin at the time of the signing.
Fabulous. What's the third?
The third is the Bezdin will determine whether Shalom Bais is a viable option at the first session. We've given, and as Eli has said before, part of our team and what we've spent is not only did we spend hours and hours with Rabbanim and getting the halachic perspective, we had a whole room of professional Orthodox mental health professionals who have all dealt with counseling in pre-divorce, post-divorce, with custody and visitation. And we made a protocols for Shalom Bayis of the questions the Bezdin, if they want to follow, to ask and to deal with. The fourth point, which is something that has been litigated now and has made a lot of the newspapers, is the protocols of a kosher home and Shabbos observance in custody matters. Now, we all know that there's a separation of church and state in the United States, and judges do not want to get involved in what's Khal of Yisrael or what's Shabbos observance, and it becomes a very hairy subject. And there's, in my view, I've seen hundreds of trials over the years that are involving, and the judge has no idea. But if you go into a contract at the time of the marriage, that this is the conduct that the children are going to be observed with in the future, now you have a contract which is specific and explains, and it can be catered to the various Haredi communities depending on their level.
Well, but can I ask you, Martin, it's starting to sound like this prenup is going to need, like lawyers, and there's so much to negotiate here. This doesn't sound like an easy document anymore.
But it's not negotiated. It's all set in. It's all written.
No, but you say that the protocols for Frumkeit have wide latitudes. So that means they got to start sitting down before the wedding. Well, what happens if we get divorced and you want not Khal of Yisrael? And isn't that like a little bit? You can spend days on this.
Well, we have one that's part of it, and we've been asked by the Hasidic community to have one for them.
You're going to have two choices: Hasidic or not Hasidic. That's basically it.
Not really. What you really have is the one that's actually on the website currently is one for the more Litvisher communities, which establish what Shemer Shabbos is, what Shmir Shabbos is, what our standard as far as kashrus is concerned, the standard OU, OK, and things like that, as far as kashrus, which will alleviate a lot of the problems that we're currently seeing in the court system. More importantly, in that guideline is what's called Shemer Shabbos, specifically with the Hasidic communities, and I'm just using the Hasidic because it's a more diverse in the sense that they're looked at as being ultra orthodox, whatever that's supposed to mean. And we have so many cases today where people are going off the derech. All the other issues that the world has seen has certainly infiltrated into our communities. And what's happening is that these people end up in court, and they say, well, of course I want my child to be in an Orthodox school. Well, this co-ed school is Orthodox. And we're talking about a Satmar family, for an example, and the other side is yelling and screaming. That's not Orthodox as far as we're concerned. As far as we're concerned, we have a Satmar a guideline and a basis. So what we're discussing is in the Hasidic communities, like Satmar or the sort, they could allude to their handbooks. Their schools have a very specific handbook of what is allowed, not only for the children, but how the parents have to go as far as dress, etc. So the specific Hasidic communities, which is very different from the Litvish communities, will have their potential. Satmar may have their addendum to the agreement that says that their Shmir Shabbos or Kashrus will be based on whatever school's handbook or the sort. But it's not going to be that you're going to sit and negotiate. The agreement is an established agreement that does not need more than a signature and a decision of which Bezdin you choose.
Okay. So Martin and Ellie, to put us up, let's say a couple get married and they get divorced, and then one of the two spouses, whichever one it may be, say, listen, I think that you could eat fish in a non-kosher restaurant because it's just fish.
Right.
So the other side would be able then to go to court to enforce and say, look, if they do that, then they lose their partial custody. Is that basically?
Well, we're going to enforce it as to the children. Yeah. In other words, we can't enforce it to any party, but you can enforce it as to the party who has the children, while the part they have the children for. Yeah. And they can.
You cannot take the children to a non-kosher restaurant.
That's right.
Or you cannot take the kids to movies on Shabbos. Or you can't.
That's right. That's right.
So would it have things like, what happens if one of the two spouses divorced has a live-in partner? Would it address and say, look, you cannot bring the kids home if you're living shalai halacha? Does it address something like that?
Well, we didn't address that specifically, but it does go into the mode and the code of the schools that the children attend. And obviously that factor per se would be something that we agreed to raise the children as is. Now we're in front of the Bezdin.
Okay. Point number 6.
I want to reiterate that point. David specifically in his Haskama wrote that he himself spoke to Rabbi Yashiv. Yashiv had no issue with the prenup other than it should not be signed at the chuppah, so people should not look at it as being a part of the chuppah.
So let's continue.
Okay.
We have point 5. What's point 6?
Okay. The Bezdin will schedule the initial session with approximately the first 2 weeks of request by either party.
Okay. Point number 7.
Within the first session, the Bezdin will set an interim payment amount as is necessary for the continuation of the household, for the children, and i.e. like to attend yeshivas and so forth.
So wait. So here's my question. Basically, you've circumvented the $150 rule by giving Bezdin basically the untrammeled power to create an amount, right?
Well, it's not this has nothing to do with a get.
Well,
a get may be an issue. In other words, there's a problem, there's a breakdown, and what we have in the community is that and what we're trying to do is not only that it's the first 2 weeks we get in there where we can solve the problems, we're making sure that every party is keeping the household going the way it was. There's not it's not an arbitrary amount. They're going to, was the household costing, what yeshiva?
So it's replacing an arbitrary amount with an unarbitrary amount, but one that has untrammeled power, which is where now we're getting to the issue of get meusa through monetary obligations.
Well, again, it's
why aren't we stepping right back into that same arrest? That's what
because one of the reasons that when we sat down to go over and to draft this with the Rabbanim and with the attorneys is what are the problems in the cases that are out there that has caused all the divorces to become so ugly. And one of it is that immediately upon there's a conflict between the parties. Again, this is not dependent on the issuance or the request of a get. It's the two parties are having a conflict. They've picked an environment to where they're going to litigate or arbitrate this, and that one party will not use their financial resources against the other for the family unit. That the house stays up, the kids are not thrown out of yeshiva.
I understand that. Okay, we'll try to get some Rav who could talk to halacha, but that same issue is the RCA. I mean, if you look at the Teshuvos of Rabbanim against the RCA, they say basically, by having a monetary amount, even if it's to support the family, right? According to the Mishkan, Yankif, et cetera, you have a real halachic issue. So just picking an unnamed amount and throwing it on the Bezdin to pick the amount, I'm not sure how that does away with the problem. It just kicks the can down the road.
Not really, because really what's happening is what's different than what's happening today. What you're basically saying is that every get is a get mosa. A guy goes to court, for argument's sake, and gets an award on what his current income should be paying to his spouse, and he ends up giving a get. So that get is a get mosa. Or if a person goes to
if the court says you are required to pay this and this amount until the divorce, right? That is exactly the issue at hand. That would be considered a get musa according to many of the poskim.
That's not what they're saying until the divorce. What they're saying is that we have to continue to maintain the family structure. Certainly, if a person claims that he wants or she wants, and she's whichever one is the supporting spouse, says, I want Shalom Bais, but they took all the money out of the accounts and they're stifling their family. That's not going to bring about Shalom Bais.
I don't disagree with that, but I'm saying, but if either one of if the supporting spouse is told, listen, you have to pay X and X amount, and it's understood that, look, once we resolve this, that number is going to change, and so it's basically being held as a card where that person says, well, now I'm in a tight spot. That is the definition of a get meusa.
Right, but I think that what you just said, that it's being held and be adjusted later on the get, is not correct. This is this is probably going to be the award, on that will come out.
And it's besides the pain, it's such an element of Khal Hashem that the Agunahs create in the world. I mean, it's Hanukkah. We say, Shem Gadol v'Kadosh b'Elamecha. The Agunah situation stands like diametrically opposed to L'cha Sisa Shem Gadol v'Kadosh b'Elamecha. So this is, besides the pain and the process and the health for the kids and the family, it dissipates the Khal Hashem element.
It's not only the Agunahs. There are a lot of issues on the other side as well. This is a very gender-neutral agreement. There are many, many issues, alienation, other things that come about with the divorce cases that are out there. And the element, you're 100% correct, the element of Khal Hashem goes on both sides.
And you can see it in the courts when the judges are looking at the parties and, the concepts, and you'd be shocked at what issues are being brought in front of a judge between the parties for a judge who, A, they may not be Jewish at all, and B, they have no knowledge of the intricacies and what they're being exposed to.
So, Martin, here's a question for you. You've been practicing family law, I understand, for decades, right?
Right.
If you have smicha from Rav Palm, it's decades. So I assume you can't be in your 20s if you have smicha from Rav Palm. That's my point. So my question to you is, there is a perception, and I'm going to make a lot of enemies by just mentioning it, but I always, that's my job. That's why I get paid the big bucks here, to take, that the Batei Din have a predisposition, certainly Hasidic Batei Din, against women. Right? There's an element of misogyny, etc., right? Shalei Sana Isha, right? So if you're a woman, you're the father, you have a daughter, and you're hearing this fantastic new thing, the, Chil Hashem and family and custody, and your kids will be everything, no Dayanim, and you're saying, do I really want three question? And I'm just saying this is the perception of misogynistic guys who are now going to rule my life, and you're the father of the girl. Like, have you seen this in Bezdin ever, by the way, certainly in certain Batei Din, and would you then hesitate if you're the father of the girl? You're the father of the bride.
Well, I think that's part of what we created here. Is that you're going to select the Bezdin. Can I say that there's a Bezdin
but Martin, most individuals, you call up 50 Balabatim and you say, excuse me, which Bezdin would you want to adjudicate if your daughter was going? They would look at you like deer in the headlight. They have no clue. They don't know Bezdin's history of dealing with custody, dealing with women, dealing with women's issues, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's just Hashlech Yahav Chal Hashem. You're passing the buck.
I don't think so. I think with the Rabbanim, people call other Rabbanim to see which Bezdin to go to. Can I go there with this case? And I think the concept of us having an established Bezdin, and this is going to be done early on, that tide can be changed, and that perception can be changed.
I think that you're doing something spectacular, and if you're successful, it'll be the biggest, forward march in Hilchas Ishus and in family law that we've seen here in America, really since the beginning of the Yishuv here. It's amazing.
Could I just end with one thing? I didn't like the term if. In Mir Hashem, when this becomes effective, and I've spoken to the Rabbanim as well about this concept, and it's time for a different schmooze, but there's no question about it, that when this becomes effective, and my eyes are 10 years down the line, when people will be signing these agreements, and things in the Batei Din will change because of this, because the control of the Batei Din and the cases going to the Batei Din will come from a recommended body, as opposed to, as it is currently, through the Dayanim and other people who choose the Batei Din. We will have a better Bezdin system, and on top of what we are doing for all of these people going through these divorces.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Joining us from New City is Rabbi Avrohom Kahn, who's the Rav of New City. He's also the Av Bezdin of the Vaad Hadin V'Hayra, a very well-known Bezdin for Dinei Mamanis and for Gittin. Welcome, Rav Kahn.
Thank you for having me.
So, Rabbi Avrohom, the RCA prenups have been around for decades, and a lot of Rabbanim have come out against it. Many have agreed with it, but many have come out against it, including the Geenfield or Moshe Sternbuch, and our program actually came out against it. And because of that, it's been discable by the certain halakim of Klal Yisrael, right? Maybe I hate to put titles on, but sort of the RCA, those who adhere to the RCA, Hadin, etc. But by the more yeshivish, it hasn't been discable because of the Irurim. This brand new the Yashar organization has brought out, I understand, has the haskam of both Rabbi Yankiv Forsheimer and Rav Miller, the two poskim of Lakewood. It doesn't get more, right-wing, Haredi, yeshivish than that. So my question is, what has changed between the two prenuptials that this one is acceptable and it doesn't have on it irur or ma'arim? What would you say? Ma'arim.
It's a very good question. There has been printed, or Moshe Sternbuch, besides that I spoke to him many times myself on this topic, he wrote in the Sefer Teshuvos Hanhagas 2 reasons why he's opposed to the RCA prenup. I think in the last volume, the Chelik Zayin and Chelik Vav, he doesn't hint to it. He writes it lehedya, and he calls it the RCA prenup. His issues are, number one, which is an issue that we always have to discuss about, as from Yidden, we're always scared, like the Chassam Sofer says, that Chodesh is Asur min HaTorah, and it's a new thing. It has never been done in Khal, so marriage is extremely sacred. And to start off a marriage by telling a couple, sign a document that if there's going to be a fight, this and this is what's going to happen, does that go hand in hand with our hashkafa? So that's one reason that Moshe Sternbuch writes in his Teshuvos that this is not, he calls it not the Ruach, he doesn't bring any proof to it, but he feels that it's not the Ruach HaTorah. The same, there's a new sefer that was just printed called Yosef from Rabbi Frati, who was a Talmud of Rabbi Yashiv, quotes the same thing in Rabbi Yashiv's name, that going into a marriage like that doesn't coincide with our hashkafa. That's one.
I just want to point out that a prenup, the ksuba is a prenup.
100%.
So Klal Yisrael invented the prenup thousands of years before the Western court system. In many ways, we led thousands of years before. But Shalote Kalbein of Leitzia was our invention. So, I'm not sure why they would be so opposed to, basically a continuation of what is a Yiddish Hanag. It's a different variation of it, but it's a continuation of something that we invented.
So, two points to answer that question. 2 points. Number one, I'm answering for other people, so it's always harder to answer because my opinion is that people should have a prenup. But I'm answering let's call it devil's advocate. The flip side, I'll even make your question a little bit stronger. The standard ksuba, which was written by Chazal, which has the husband is going to support his wife, and then if there's a dissolution of marriage, how much he's going to pay. So it's a very sacred document. It's from the times of the Gemara. There's even the Kubolim that wrote Pi Kabbalah. There's a lot of stuff hinted. But to make it more, the Shulchan Aruch discusses making monetary, financial prenups, kaseder in the document. There's so many discussions in Shulchan Aruch to make a financial and to discuss it, and there nobody seems over there to write that it's not the hashkafa HaTorah. But Moshe Sternbuch and Rabbi Yashiv over there, it's quoted, Moshe Sternbuch, he wrote himself, Rabbi Yashiv in his name, that it doesn't go with the Ruach HaTorah to add such a document. Your question is a valid question. It's a question that I was bothered with myself, but I'm just stating their position for now. In the hashkafa, and believe it or not, most people who discuss the prenup, and I have people who call me about it very, very often, they're bothered more on the hashkafa part. They don't even know that there's a halacha machlekes that's behind there also. So let's put the hashkafa part on the side and we'll address the halacha. Maybe we'll try to take care of the hashkafa issue also. There's an halacha issue that was brought up with the prenup. Now, to give a hakdama, I'm fully okay with the RCA's prenup. I've discussed this many times, the halachas with the Rabbi. What I'm saying now is just devil's advocate. The other side, it doesn't in any way this is not my opinion. But the RCA's prenup is based on that there's a hischayvus mammon that the husband's giving to the wife if they're not living together as husband and wife, a certain amount of money until they get divorced. Because once they're divorced, they're not husband and wife anymore, which is meant to be able to get the husband to give the get instead of giving the monetary amount, which is in the RCA agreement $150 a day, which comes out to about $54,000 a year. Now their cheshbon where it came from, which was already discussed by Rav Herzog in his Takanas Agunah, Rav Zalman Nechama, Goldbaum, many Gedolei Poskim, Rav Symbolist writes about this, is that even though in certain cases a wife is not entitled to mezainis, because if she's deemed a meredith, that she's leaving the marriage without halachic grounds to leave the marriage, but if the husband's holding her back from getting married, which is called mukeves linaseh, he's obligated to give her mezainis. It's based on a sugya of mugereshes or any mugereshes, a complicated sugya. But Rabbi Yashiv and many Piskei Din Rabbanut and the Teshuvos from Rabbi Yashiv, it's discussed kaseder that a husband is holding back his wife from getting remarried is mechuyev to support her. Al mukeves linaseh is mechuyev to support her. When he's chayiv to give her a get and he doesn't give her a get, he's obligated to support her. That everybody agrees with. Now the problem is where Rabbi Yashiv felt the problem is that if the husband is being mischayiv himself $150, and let's say that's more than the amount that he's obligated to support her. Let's say in his town the minig is mezainis goes bust to the minig, or how much you were living before, it's $100 a day. The extra $50 he's just promising to support her. Now there's no problem. The husband's allowed to promise to support his wife more than he's obligated. But since he's doing it contingent if something happens, and he doesn't think, he's not going into the marriage that he's going to get separated and divorced. So he's doing something contingent on something that he doesn't really think it's going to happen. He doesn't have gemiras das. He's not accepting as a proper kinyan, and it's called an asmachta. And we know asmachta is like kanyo. And therefore, he's not going to be mechuyev al pi halacha to pay that extra amount of money because he never did a proper kinyan on it. So
wait. Hello. There are ways around asmachta. I mean, lefnei bezdin chashuv. I mean, there are all kinds of eitzes for asmachta.
True. So let's get to that. Therefore, if you look at the RCA's prenup, they have the best eitzah, which is quoted in all the Rishonim. They write in there the like asmachta, just like all our ksubas.
Yeah, like a type of the shtara, and they also probably write bezdin chashuv, etc. Right?
Yeah, that's how they take care of all of it. Rabbi Elyashiv had an issue that Rabbi Elyashiv held based on a Rambam. Now again, this part I didn't discuss with Rabbi Elyashiv himself. When I was discussing with different Talmidim of Rabbi Elyashiv, they told me this from Rabbi Elyashiv, which is a chiddush gadol. If this would have been a choshesh mishpat shayla, you're right. Rabbi Elyashiv might have not been choshesh for a shittas yachid in the Rambam that holds that even if you would write the like asmachta, it's still a problem. But over here, since if the chance that the Rambam is right and this shittas yachid is right, and the like asmachta doesn't work, and then it stays in asmachta, and the husband's giving the get because he doesn't want to pay that extra $50. Then the get is a get with the oinus moment shalei al pidin. Then it's a get musa, and she gets remarried. Therefore, Rabbi Elyashiv felt that even though a choshesh mishpat, there are proofs that Rabbi Elyashiv wouldn't pass like this. There are piskei dinim where a choshesh mishpat he wasn't choshesh for these shittas, but over here he was choshesh for shittas yachid. That even though we get around the smachtas with many different ways. The Chacham Sofer holds every legal document doesn't have an issue of a smachta. That's what some tzedek holds like that also. But over here to be choshesh shittas yachid, because if we're wrong, then there's a shayla mamzera. So Rabbi Elyashiv wanted to be machma.
Good. So here's my question, Rabbi Kahn. Here's my question. Even if it's an oinus mammon, right? You have. He could pay it. So you have the Ramah that says, the Ramah Kuf Lamed Daled that says that by an oinus mammon, as long as he has the option of paying the money, and he was mechayev himself the money, the Ritva, and the Shulchan Aruch brings Ritva that says, the Ramah says it's good, and the Ritva says, but the Yevet, it's certainly good. So you have a suffix whether we hold like the Rambam. If we hold like the Rambam, additionally, you still have the pashtus of the Shulchan Aruch, right? Additionally, on top of that, you have the Torah's Gittin, which is one of the things there was Saimach on, that he's saying. Yeah. So let me just say, the Torah's Gittin's argument is, he says, is that let's say a woman decides she wants to get divorced. Well, the father of the parents of the girl decide they really dislike this guy. So they tell the wife, you know what? We want you to be the biggest witch in the world. When he comes home, bang him on the head with a frying pan, ruin his food, embarrass him in public, bounce his checks, scratch his car, and he gives a get because of that. So the Torah's Gittin says, are you going to say it's not a get? He says, of course it's a get. You would have a mamzerim running around all over. So he says, so we're going to figure out an eitzah, how to make the husband miserable. We're not saying it's for a get. We're telling you, let's make his life miserable. So clearly, that's the eighth of the Torah's Gittin, and $150 a day, by the way, certainly doesn't rise to the level where it's egregious. It's like they probably took some type of average of what child support.
They hired a forensic accountant. I have the document.
So you have a suffix on the Rambam. You have the pashtus of the Ramah. On top of that, you have the Torah's Gittin. So because of a triple suffix, we're going to make a woman an Agunah.
So I'll tell you more. Exactly all your tainas. There's a letter from Reb Asher Weiss that writes exactly right, like that. He writes that Kibul Knas Alatme, the Ramah writes, is v'yeshem sheish lochish, was it's a chumrah, even though the Torah says it's to make Hadin, but that's how the Ramah says it, and it's chumrah on top of chumrah on top of chumrah. Reb Asher Weiss wrote a tshuva to the Rabbi Willig, to the RCA, to the Bezdin of America, that they should move forward with their prenup because it's a chumrah on top of chumrah on top of chumrah, and the positive part outweighs saving an Agunah. Outweighs those chumrah. Exactly your point. Rabbi Elyashiv felt that chumrah, he was nervous. I'll tell you, someone told me he was one time by Rabbi Elyashiv, and Rabbi Elyashiv said, what's going to happen? You're going to have a chasana where the husband's going to look at the wife before the chasana says, $150, I'm being mischayev myself $10,000 a day. And they're going to have a Rosh Hashiva who might not know Hilchos Gittin so well, and say, wow, such a beautiful chasana. Let's put in $10,000, and then it's really going to be a get musa. Rabbi Elyashiv was scared with dealing with mamzerim.
I understand that, but he's afraid that a guy's going to write $10,000. So you educate the rabbanim, but when you're having the Jewish press every week a list of 20 husbands, You have we're going to have on the show a woman who's one Agunah is 20 years, one 10 years, one 15 years. So for Shashim, maybe somebody's going to come along. Doesn't that sound like, how are you ma'agin somebody on a shash like that? I don't understand that.
So like this, I 100% agree with you. I deal with this on a daily basis of the complications of Agunah, and it's really complicated. I want to take it to another step. If somebody does not have a prenup, and then they're going to end up what usually is ending up happening. And my office is next door to the courthouse. I'm there almost every single day. And you walk into the third floor of Rockland County Courthouse, and you'll see how many front people are there in the waiting room. We shouldn't think that it's one out of every 100 guys. It's maybe one guy to every 10 years who are in the waiting room. And there's so many cases, and these schlep. I believe there are bigger issues of the Gittin that are happening through the courthouse than if there would be a prenup, because what's going on in the courthouse very, very often, it's possible that the courthouse is paskening much more that the lady should get than al pi halacha, and she's turning to the husband, you know what, I'll forgive you on this amount of money if you give me a get, and the husband's doing
what you're talking about is that under the New York get law, right, which the Jewish press Shalom class, I understand, put in place, the judge has a right to monetarily basically fine the husband if they feel that he is preventing the woman from getting remarried because of a religious get. And that creates real get musa, because he's not doing it with all these ways to do it, nuance, mention the get. They're doing it, give a get, or I'm going to double the child care, I'll double alimony, I'll triple, that's real get musa. So by putting it into the court system, you have a much bigger issue of mamzeris and get musa, and you do that if it's in front of Rabbanim on the shash that some Rav is going to change it to $10,000 a day.
100% more, but let's even put New York get law on the side. Without New York get law, if the couple goes to court and court paskins more than halacha for the lady, and the husband can't pay it, and he turns to his wife and says, "Look, I can't pay it. Could you forgive $500 of this, and I'll give you the get instead?" And she says, "Okay." That could be looked at as the honest moment, but it could be looked like the honest moment. But
respectfully, Rabbi Kahn, I think that there's. First of all, you have the Ramah that says it's not, because he has a way out. He could pay it. And secondly, you have the Bais Yosef by Sukrikin and the Nesivos that say beferish that if she didn't ask for it, she's very happy. Pay triple child support. I'm going to live like a queen. Then he comes on his own volition and he says, by the way, I'll give you a get if you're Michael the money I owe you. There's the Taras Gittin, the Bais Yosef, etc. They say there's not a problem because she didn't ask for it. It wasn't, she didn't ask for the quid pro quo.
I agree with you. What I'm just trying to bring out that is a bigger shiloh than the prenup.
So what is the new one do that the old one didn't?
So like this, the new one that this organization Yashar coalition put together. From the last one I read, people tell me very often that there's more stuff in there that I didn't see. But it seems like it tells the couple to pick a bezdin, either to pick a few batidim, either to pick a Rav who's going to decide on the bezdin, or to pick a specific bezdin to go to, and bezdin is going to adjudicate everything. So really, it's a beautiful thing because it's limiting the scope of fighting to which bezdin. I don't know if most couples are capable of understanding before they get married which bezdin to go to. I don't even know if there's a good list of batidim that people feel comfortable going to. And also, if the bezdin does say you're obligated to give a get, again, I don't know how they're going to force it. So that they had basically they just are making people sign an arbitration agreement to any bezdin that they should go to, and I don't know what they're going to do if the person says, I'm not going.
That's exactly my question. If they're not putting in a monetary amount, how will the bezdin, even though they have absolutely right a signed arbitration, legally binding arbitration agreement, how can they enforce it without ending up back in the exact same place where they were with the RCA prenups?
No, there is a small difference, because if they're going to a bezdin that paskins like this Rabbi Yashiv and the Tzitz Eliezer of Herzog that Mukebes Lehinase is obligated to pay Mezainis, and the bezdin makes them pay Mezainis based on the spot the amount that they think that Mezainis is. And if they're living in a very high community, it could be $500 a day. If they're living in somewhere where they're getting beans and butter, it'll be $18 a day. But on the spot, they're mechayiv them. Then there's no question of an asmach of any extra money, because that's an honest moment kedin. If that's what's going to happen, then this is the best prenup that's possible.
Okay, so you're saying that the answer is, since la halacha he has to pay child support while she's a mukeves linase. So basically, this is a binding arbitration.
Spousal support.
Spousal support. Okay, she is basically, you're doing away with all the. It could take 6 months or a year to agree to a shtar birurin. Additionally, you could end up in a zabla, which is basically machne Yehuda. You're having, a bunch of who knows what type of cronyism goes on. You're getting actually a bezdin chashav, hopefully a real, bezdin that is not motivated by, very long yeshivas, etc. You could also pick a bezdin without tayanim. Additionally, that bezdin has the right to say it's not $150 a day, it's either $50 a day or $1,000 a day, depending on what the husband makes and what lifestyle they've had previously. So you're tying the ma'agen's hands here much more than you would if you didn't have it. And you're saying, in a way, it could be much more tied than even in the RCA, because the RCA is limited to $150 a day. Here, this could be a very wealthy person where for the $150 a day, it's chump change to him. So they have the ability to say it's not $150 a day, it's $15,000 a day, or $1,500 a day. So it could have much more teeth than the RCA prenuptial. That's what you're suggesting.
I don't know if it would have more teeth than the RCA prenup, because if you ask the RCA, and I asked Rabbi Weissman many times, he has never had a prenup that came to him and a husband said, oh, I'm extremely wealthy, I don't mind $150 a day. It seems like psychologically every husband minds, no matter how much money they have, they rather give the get than see the $150 a day disappear. So when I asked Rabbi Weissman, their last cheshbon was made in 2013, why did they redo it? He says, look, because they've never seen a reason to do it. Even the wealthiest people haven't given gittin. So,
well, could it be? But I would argue in Rabbi Weissman respectfully, and I would say I don't know what's the siba and what's the soiviv. It could be that the people who are signing prenups are menschliche people.
Could be,
but,
right?
But if because to me, $150 a day, which is $50,000 a year, to a lot of people, it could be a joke. You have a guy, he's earning $1 million. It's nothing. It's chump change. And anyway, he's not going to see his kids starve, right? So I would disagree with Rabbi Weissman, and I would say, the people who, since it's not something that everybody does, those who do it are really ernst the people. That would be my counter argument to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Rabbi Kahn, it's always an honor to have you on with us, and I wish you bezdin great hatzlacha.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Joining us, we have Sarah, who has a story to tell us about somebody who did not use prenuptials. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
Sarah, could you tell us your story?
So I was married 5 years. I had 2 kids. And after a very difficult marriage, I had a really horrible divorce. I spoke with many different rabbanim and therapists, and I just wasn't being heard. My ex was pretty high in the community, and I just did not know how to move forward. I wasn't looking to fight. I wasn't looking for this to become a fight or anything over my children, anything. I served the Hasmana, but he didn't show up to Basin, and it ended up in court. I was not earning a lot of money when my husband left. He wiped out all the bank accounts and took everything that we had. My parents were able to help me a little bit, but really not much. And I was really left very in the dark without help that I really could have gotten. Court schlepped for 2 years. In the end, it ended up getting settled by a mediator, and we moved on. But my kids, my parents, my family, everybody suffered. It literally took over our entire life.
So tell me, how long you served him with Azmana to Bezdin, and what was his response?
There was no response. He took me straight to court.
And is he somebody who learned in yeshiva? Like, is he quote unquote, obviously not, but a ben Torah?
Yes, quote unquote.
And so you didn't want to go, and then he served you papers to court? Like walk us,
yes.
How long did it take to get to court?
It took about 8 months, and then court dragged on for about 2 years.
And why did he want to go to court? Like, what made him think he would get a better outcome in court?
I'm honestly not sure. This is the way he wanted to do things, so we kind of had to go with what he wanted.
And was there ever a doubt that you would get a get? Like, did he threaten you that he wouldn't give a get, etc.?
He never threatened that he wouldn't, but I definitely he did tell me that I have to give up a lot, and I did give up a lot in order to get the get in the end. I knew eventually I would get it because he's not the kind of person that would hold it, but until I got it, it just made the whole bitter experience even more bitter.
So in retrospect, you say that if you had had a prenup, you would have been much better off.
Oh, absolutely. I would have had support from a Bais. I would have had support from the people involved. My family wouldn't have been destroyed the way they were.
How were they? Talk about the impact to your family.
My family was also very much groping in the darkness here. My kids were not even knowing what's going on. There was no money. Like, I was borrowing money from people just to help me get through this.
Right.
You know, having a prenup, I would have had money for my kids. Having a prenup would have just taken care of this. It wouldn't have affected everybody the way it did.
Okay, would you ever remarry without a prenup?
No, I wouldn't. The pain that it could have spared me and everybody around me, my friends, my grandparents, my family, is just there. You can't put a price on that.
I'm curious, did his family suffer too?
It's interesting. I never really thought about it, but no, because at the end of the day, he got what he wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it did take a few years for him.
Yes. But like I said, I wasn't looking to fight. Like, he wanted the kids to take the kids. You know, it wasn't like I really wasn't having a battle with him.
Do you have your own kids today?
I do.
Okay. So it was. I understand. Is there anything else you would want to tell our listeners about, the advantages of having a prenup and the dangers of not having one?
I feel like the dangers of not having one really is that you're not doing a prenup for yourself. You're doing it for everybody around you. And everybody who cares about you is really affected if there is no prenup in place. And I think that's important for people to realize, that it's not just about them.
But you're saying the parents get sucked into it, and grandparents get sucked into it, et cetera, as well as the kids.
Even the teachers of the children.
In what way? Explain.
Because the children are being affected. The teachers are the ones trying to help the children.
Right. And did you try to get a siruv in Besdin?
No. I wasn't looking to fight. I wasn't looking to make... I wanted to move on.
Okay. Anything else you could share that you think would be important?
I think that's it.
Okay. Sarah, thank you very much, and I hope that your life moves forward in a positive manner for you and your children.
Thank you.
Okay, all the best.
Thank
you. Bye-bye. Joining us from New York is Nechama Esther Wassermann, who has just a hair-raising story to tell about her own experience. She did not get a prenup, and it caused her unbound aggravation. Welcome, Nechama Esther.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, Nechama Esther, share with us your story.
So I got married in 2004. I was married for about 10 years, and after I tried to make everything work, but after a very long time, I decided that I had to remove myself and my kids from a very unhealthy situation. And when I made that decision, essentially my husband made a decision to, deny me a basic right of leaving a marriage. And he has been withholding a get now for almost 5.5 years.
So have you tried to take him to Besdin? You didn't sit by idly, I imagine, for 5.5 years.
No, I did not. I am not. I'm always very actively spending an untold amount of hours on trying to get a get. I still am. I went to court a few times. I am back in court now. I have been to numerous bati dinim. So far, nobody has been able to help me. I have a few siruvim, and that hasn't been able to help me either. And I'm working every day to still try and get a get.
Share with us, go to the beginning. So, you leave your husband, you say, look, this marriage is over, and I just want out, right? So just talk us through the details. What happens next?
Yeah, so I just want to point out that, very often I find when part of the Agunah problem in general, I think, is that people hear it and they think that right away for some reason, I find all people, whether it's Rabbanim, Dayanim, just friends, neighborhood people, they hear Agunah, they hear divorce, and they think politics, and they want to stay out of it. And the truth is that I think that my story couldn't be simpler in a way that it was simply I was in a marriage with a person who was unwell, extremely depressed, barely left the house, didn't have a job, was not a good father, was not a good husband. And, after a time, it was clear to me, it was clear to my kids that we just couldn't live like that. And so I left. I made sure, to speak to a Rav. I spoke to a few lawyers. I, prepared as well as I could, tried to get, the most help and support that I could. And from the beginning, he refused to come to Beeston.
So to which is the first Bezdin you called him to?
I wasn't sure who to turn to. A friend of mine referred me to Rabbi Webster's Beeston in Borough Park. I spoke to him. He was very nice. He sent out 1 hazmana, 2 hazmana, 3 hazmanos, and then he issued a C-Rub. He wasn't willing to come, and then he told me, I'm really just a small guy. I don't know how to continue to help you. Go to someone bigger. So I actually went to Revelia Brudney and I told him about my situation, and he's like, listen, seems like you're in a really bad situation. Try Rabbi Spiro. So I went to...
What's Rabbi Spiro's name? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Okay, not important. Okay, Rabbi, do you know the name of the Bezdin?
He's based in Tzedek of Flatbush. He's on Avenue M in Flatbush. Okay, so you go to Rabbi Spiro. I go to Rabbi Spiro. He was very nice. He tried to help. He actually got, a few family members in the door, but again, my husband refused to show up. He issued a C-Rov as well, and he said, you need a bigger guy than me. So wait, is your husband like a yeshiva man? Did he learn in yeshivas and stuff? He went to Panovich in Eretz Yisrael. His family has some Israeli background. He went to BMG in Lakewood. His family has some close ties to the Rosh Yeshivas over there. And, he learned there. Okay. He was learning there. We lived in Lakewood when I got married. But he very quickly left yeshiva and for many years just really didn't do much. Lost touch with any friends that he had, refused to get help. I kind of just really, I really value family and the institution of marriage, so I worked really hard to make things work, but ultimately it just wasn't meant to be. So you, after Rabbi Webster, after Rabbi Spiro, where did you go? Rabbi Webster, Rabbi Spiro, then I ended up by Rabbi Kraus. I believe his first name is Simcha Kraus, and he sits on a Beeston with the Agudas HaRabbanim of America, Beeston with Rabbi Raavad, which I think is a more familiar name to people. Okay. So I was by their Beeston. There was also a Rabbi Shucha that sat on the Beeston. Let's just say it didn't go very well. Did he show up? Did your husband show up? He didn't show up. They tried to speak to a few of the family members. They sent out hazmanas. It slept so long. So talk to me about length of time. Rabbi Spiro, this is how long? Now you left the house. Rabbi Spiro was like how many months into this? So
To get your first Siruf took how long?
The first year from Rabbi Webster took, let's say, 6 months. You know,
okay,
so
and
I
then
left
Rabbi, and then
time, Pesach time, I had one. And in between all this, I always, you know, this wasn't the only thing I was doing. I was always trying to, like, contact the family members and be like, look, we're in this situation. Can you help me out? You know, and
what was the response?
They were very, very angry at me. They felt like I was breaking up the family. They feel like divorce is just like the worst thing possible. Their parents are divorced, a little bit of background. So, and to them, you know, just divorce is just like the absolute end of the world. And they were very angry, and they really, I think they thought for about a year that I would come back. I did get a phone call from one of the siblings, you know, asking me what it would take for me to come back, as if, you know, there was a price on a happy life. And they really weren't willing to work with me. After a while, when they saw I was serious, they tried to sort of control the situation. They're like, well, we don't want Askanim involved. We don't need Dayan. We don't need this. We don't need that. Oh, you can't be in court. You know, if you're in court, it means that you're fighting. And I did go to court to settle custody, and it was settled within about a year.
So wait. You're jumping. So Rabbi Spiro was 6 months. And when did you go to court at what point? After you got the Siruf or before?
I actually went to court at the same time that I sent the first Hazmana, because I knew that I was actually being threatened by my husband that if I left the house without his permission, then before he was ready, then he would, you know, just call the police and say that I kidnapped our children. So I went to court right away for custody as well, with permission from a Rav, as well as from Rabbi Webster, as well as sending Asmana at the same time. So I was in court from the beginning, just for custody. I wasn't even asking for child support. And
were you asking to custody that your husband should not have rights to the kids, or you were only asking custody that you had a right to take them out of the house?
Yeah, not at all. I was never trying to take custody away from him. I just, a right to live separately, and that the kids would primarily live with me, you know, just as their mother and caretaker, and that he would have visitation. And it was settled in 2015 after about a year, and he had, I would say, about 40% custody, really, really generous. He, you know, full weekends, every Thursday, every other Monday, half of every holiday, a lot of custody. So much that, you know, my kids didn't really like it very much. So, yeah, I never tried to withhold the kids from them. I never...
Okay, so let's continue. So, Rabbi Spiro, you're at Pesach. Then Rabbi Webster. Then you go to Rabbi Spiro. How long does it take for him to issue a Siruf?
So, I think... Also, I didn't go to him right away, because at that point, you know, I got in touch with the family, and they were like, oh, if you don't go to court, then, and, you know, and you don't try to, like, go to another beis din, then we're going to help you settle this. We'll hire a attorney and we'll help you settle the get. So I waited. And, and, you know, and I gave them a chance. And, you know, they're going back and forth and schlepping with emails, and they're like, okay, yes, soon we're going to get someone. So I went to, the time I went to Rabbi Spiro's beis din, I believe it was sometime in 2015. I'll look it up exactly.
Okay, I believe you. That's fine. That's fine. It's 2015. And how long did it take him to issue a Siruf?
Okay, no, it was actually already at the end of 2016 that I went to him.
Okay, and how long did it take him to issue a Siruf?
Probably also about 6 months. You know,
okay, so they don't do. It's not an easy thing to get a Siruf. You're saying 6 months.
It takes time, because what happens is he was smart. He's very smart. So what he did was he would get one Siruf and one husband, and he would ignore it, and then he would get the second one and he would say, okay, I'm coming, and he would, like, schedule an appointment, and then they can't send out the next husband, and then he would cancel, and then he would reschedule, and then another family member came. So they schlepped it out.
Okay.
And then when they got to issuing a sirup, he would say, "Oh, but she went to court," and so that even though I had the heter to go to court, he was always schlepping things, so it made things take very long. I ultimately got a second sirup from him in 2017, and then I ended up by Rabbi Kraus and Rabbi Ralbag's Bais.
By the way, the first two Rabbanim, do you think you were treated fairly?
Rabbi Webster was very nice and very respectful, just in general as a person. And he right away said, like, I'm not the right person to help you. So I respected that and moved on. Rabbi Spiro was nice. He definitely really tried to help.
Okay, good. So it was a good experience. Your outcome wasn't good, but your experience was good as far as a woman in Besdin.
It was okay. I had help. My brother is always really helping me, and I have help from family.
Okay.
I would say it was okay. It's a little rough. It's rough, and you have to we had to really push for what we wanted. There was a lot. There's a lot more details, and it's rough going, I would say. But
what was rough about it? It sounds like they were very nice and gave you what you wanted.
Well, they didn't want to write the sirup. They said it really wasn't fair. Then there was a story that my husband was living in his sister's home in an apartment, and I said to the Bais, it's not right. Like, they're helping Masari Ladin. And, so they called them in, and they got very angry, and they got very angry. This family, they're powerful, they're very smart, they're successful, they have money, and people get scared of them. They simply get scared, and they don't want to help. He also has a trust fund that, I asked the Bais, and also I said, call his uncle, tell him that he shouldn't be getting the trust fund. Like, it's not, again, it's every step of the way. It's a whole fight, just really pushing your way. And people are they're scared to get involved. They're scared to put their foot down. It's like, this catch-22 where we can't really go to the court system to help us with a get, but the Bais system is not really good enough to enforce things in our community. So
continue. So now you're by Rabbi Ralbag. What's that like?
So that was a pretty bad experience. We ended up just paying thousands of dollars, spending hours and hours and hours, and they ended up ultimately sending out 3 hazmanas.
What when you say you spent hours and hours doing what? If he didn't show up to Besdin, what's there to do?
They didn't even want to send out the hazmana because they weren't even. I'm trying to even remember back why they were giving me such a hard time. But look, I'll tell you this: at the end, they refused to write me a sirup, even though I had spent all the time and money, which they charge a lot. They're a premium.
How much did they charge?
They are $250 an hour per Dayan. So
and how many Dayanim were there?
So at one point we needed 3. They said that they required 3 Dayanim to sit and hear my case. So they each had to get paid per hour. And and the outcome was like nothing. I didn't get any closer to my resolution.
How much did you pay them? If you had to guesstimate what you paid them over the experience, how much was it?
I don't know, maybe $5,000.
But you got nothing for it, you're saying?
No, I didn't even get. At the end, they refused to write me a sirup simply because they didn't want to be involved with such a difficult case.
But they didn't give you back your money for the time you spent.
They didn't give me back my money. To this day, I don't have a sirup from them, and I went to them specifically because other Batei Dinim said, "Oh, we're not good or big enough to help you. You need a bigger, stronger guy." So I went to them because they're supposed to be the bigger, stronger guy. Happens to be that they are a Bais that's recognized by the state of Israel, which is, something, it means something. They're generally nationally well recognized as well. A seer from them definitely means something, with their Rabbanim's name on it, and they didn't give it. They're like, no, you don't need it. You already have. Like, what do you mean I don't need it? I spent, 8 months of my life waiting for you to help me, spending money, and they still to this day, they didn't write the seer, and I feel that they owe it to me because they sent, what else is it based in for? They sent out 3 hazmanas. I thought that's how it works, but I don't know.
Okay, so you went there and you basically said it was, you didn't get anything for it. So continue. What else?
Right. So I ended up, at that point, my family, we tried to apply some public pressure, for years. It had been 4 years at that point, so I think we're in 2018. For people had always been pressuring me, oh, go public, do this, do that, and the whole time, it's been 4 years, and the whole time the family just refuses to help me. Whatever I do, they get mad at me. I go to court, it's good. I pull out of court because they tell me
What do they want?
They just simply, they don't want to spend their time, their emotional energy, being involved. And if you ask them, they'll say that, oh, of course, we want our son, our brother to give you a get. We think it's the right thing. If we could sign the paper, we will. But when it comes down to it, they have never, they won't have a meeting, if they won't do anything concrete, if they've done things, I don't really know about it. They just refuse to work together at all. And they just, they simply say, like, we can't. I heard from one of the brothers, I had a Rav, his Rav call him up, and he said, yeah, I was just on the phone with my brother. I asked him to give a get, and he yelled at me, and I yelled at him, and I told him no. I was like, really? After 4 years, you picked up the phone and you called your brother and you yelled at each other? Do you know what I've done in the past 4 years? That's not showing me much. A phone call after 4 years, so it's like, we tried. And it's just, to me, it's just really disgraceful that, the community in general lets this entire family just stand by, and anyone who I speak to is just, scared to work with them, scared to deal with them.
Are they grandchildren, or are they not grandchildren? Are they related to Rabbi Kahn and Wassermann? I'm sure you've been asked this 100 times.
No. They're from the Wassermann family is from Israel. The Bassman family is known more locally.
Which family? I'm sorry?
The Bassman family is known more in America. Yeah. Okay.
So that was what happened after that? After the Raavad incident?
So we tried to apply some public pressure. They got really angry, but again, they didn't really do anything. They didn't call us and say, what can we do? How can we work together? I'm always going to meet another Rav, meeting as many Rabbanim as I can to help me. And people will say, oh, we feel really sorry for you, but, it's not us. We're too small. We're too this. It's too political. People just really aren't willing to get involved and help. So then I ended up finding Rabbi Avi Kahn's Bais about 1.5 years ago. And his Bais, I would say, is the first one that I've come across that is actually doing things the way I would imagine, they're supposed to be done. I'm not a rabbi.
Is that the Rabbi Kahn from? That's the Rabbi Kahn from New City. Is that the same one?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I didn't know Mazavi and Avrohom, but good. Okay. Continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he got involved, 1.5 years ago, and him and his whole team, we haven't met people that are just really doing things in the right way. His Bais, everything he says just makes so much sense. It's so brilliant. And I really believe that what he's doing is going to change, what's going on in our community.
So has he been able to help you? Like, where are you with you get?
So Right now, so far, I still don't have a get. He's trying. My case is, from what I understand, one of the top 15 most difficult cases right now in the world, and it's very difficult because there's not much in the way of Batei Dinim enforcing things in the court system these days, unless people sign a prenup or a postnup, which is a big thing that he's campaigning for, and which I really think is that's what our community needs, because for a very long time I questioned, like, how could this be? I'm like 3, 4, or 5 years in, and I'm like, how could it be? Like, I know the Torah is set up in a way for all generations that it's good and it works. So how could it be? Like, how could this be happening? There has to be an answer. So, I heard people told me different things. I heard like, oh, well, this is primarily a North American problem. It's only in America. It's an American problem, the land of the free and whatever. And finally, when I spoke to Rabbi Kahn, he said, no, it's not a problem with the Torah, obviously. It's not a problem with America. We have a great court system. It's a problem with the yeshiva community because we have to adapt, just like, there are all different things that, the internet came, we have to adapt, we have to build filters. So, there's all different things that have come into our community and we've had to learn to adapt. And this is, the Agunah crisis is a really big thing. 10 years ago, it was taken care of with a different method that we all know doesn't work anymore. So, the modern Orthodox came up with a prenup, and they don't really have this problem anymore, but it's the yeshiva community that has not stepped up to the plate. And, for some reason, just almost every Rav that I've met is afraid to get their feet wet with this issue. And so he wrote a prenup that's, from what I understand, accepted, across the board by all, yeshiva, ultra-Orthodox, Rabbanim, whatever you want to call it. And right now, what I am trying to do is Rabbi Kahn is trying to do, we are desperate to get my husband to simply sign this prenup, which says that, he'll listen to whatever a beast decides. So far, we've been unsuccessful. I am in court right now with a very, very good lawyer, Miriam Zakarin, that was recommended by Rabbi Kahn. I'm in Supreme Court in Brooklyn trying to get a civil divorce, and at the same time hoping that the court system will help me, enforce the get law, and there's a law that you're not allowed to bar someone from remarriage. So we're working on that and hoping that, the pressure from the court system will have an effect. But it's hard. It's very hard, and we don't know exactly which way it's going to go. So,
question for you: do you think it's look, it's a very sad story,
right?
And anybody taking advantage this way is what can I tell you? Is just not. It's against the entire Torah. It's just against the entire Torah, this type of behavior. My question 100%. To you is that is it realistic to expect families to help? Because, when you're dealing with a rogue individual, which you clearly are,
right.
Maybe they don't listen to their parents. Maybe they don't listen to anybody. You have people, they pfeift the ganze Welt on.
Right.
there are really bad people out there who do really bad things and don't listen to anybody. So, do you think families really can make a difference?
So, yeah, I get this question a lot, and I think about it too a lot. And, and I think that, you can't go it's one of those things where, there's a fine balance, and I can't say, they're 100% responsible, and at the same time, I don't think that you could say that they have zero responsibility. I do think that, everyone says family first, and I think that we do have a certain amount of responsibility to our children, our siblings, and our cousins, our nieces, our nephews, and I think that, it really depends on the situation. But in this situation, this man lives in his family's home. He doesn't have a job. He's supported off of a family trust fund. He's supported by living by his family, and he doesn't have any friends. He doesn't have a job, and lawyers. I don't. Plenty of support has come from his family. Lawyers have been hired from his family, by his family, and you're
saying if his family is supporting him financially, etc. So it's not just like, okay, here's a family that they can't do anything. It's a family that is actually helping subvert the process.
They're supporting the process, and, it's one of these tricky things where they might deny it and they might say that they're not. And at the same time, I know him well because I lived with him for 10 years. And I know that he might scream, he might say a lot of things, but his bark is a lot louder than his bite. And at the end of the day, they keep just saying like, oh, we wish we could. But like, what have you done? Number one, what have you done? And number two, if they're not willing to come to a meeting, if Rabbi Kahn calls them and they're not willing to just come down to his beast and to have a conversation, then what does that say? The two don't add up. Maybe they're doing things and they're not telling me. I don't know. But I've had many, many experiences where they've really just, they've done things that have, negatively affected the process. They held me back for many years. They asked me to pull out of court. I don't get any child support, by the way. I'm really, really struggling. And
do they have any other shidduchim to do, these people?
Not anymore, unfortunately not. They did have 2 more shidduchim to do within the past 5 years, but it was like they got married within like 2 or 3 years of me being separated, and I'm just not that kind of person to, and now if it was 5 years later, I might try to make a bigger deal, but I'm generally not that kind of person. Like, I'm not out to hurt people. I want to settle things nicely. I made an offer a long time ago, there's nothing financial that we're fighting over. I'm not asking for anything. I made an offer to, I just want to get to.
Are you holding him up for alimony? Are you holding him up for alimony?
No, absolutely not.
Are you trying to prevent him? Are you trying to prevent him from seeing the children?
No.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that people who are doing shidduchim, when they hear a story of a family acting really hideously in a situation like that, should think twice?
I think they should, but what's even more, upsetting to me is that people hear it and they think that, well, there must be something wrong with her. Well, I'm sure, the family said, they're respected members of the community. The mother's a principal, a teacher, a mora. I'm sure they're such good people. They call their Rav and they say, yeah, they're such nice people. It's such an unfortunate situation. But the truth is, anyone withholding a get, anyone who's part of such a family, it's such a terrible thing to do that there really has to be something wrong. I think about it all the time. When one of my siblings needs help, and the lens that we go to help one of our siblings, like, I always try to imagine, like, if my brother was living in my basement and who was refusing to give a get, would I just sit there and be like, I told him to give it, and he said he doesn't want to, and I said okay.
So can I ask you? Where is the mother a principal?
In Bais Rachel.
Where is that?
She's not a principal, but she's a well-respected teacher. In Muncie, it's Bais Rachel. It's a high school in Muncie.
What is that like? For what type of? It's
Hasidish. It's not a specific Hasidus, but it's a well-respected Hasidish high school for elementary and high school, actually, for girls, and it's a pretty well-respected school, and I tried very, very hard to appeal to the people at Bais Rachel for help, and they told me that they know that Mrs. Wassermann is such a good person. It can't be that if there was a way to help me, she wouldn't be doing it. I spoke to her best friend. I spoke to this one. I spoke to that one.
What did her best friend say?
she says, oh, she's in such a bad, horrible situation. She's already such a sad person. She's been through so much in her life. Of course she's trying her best. And she said, I can never even tell her what to do. My job is to just support her. I know she's such a good person. And, what she's done to help, I don't know. I had Rabbi
Does she,
call her.
do you speak to her? She visits the kids. She's the grandmother. What does she say when you ask her?
I haven't seen her in a few years, and no, I haven't seen her.
So what is
not to see me.
What is your husband? I can still call him your husband. What does he say? Like, does he plan on keeping you in Agunah the rest of your life? Like, what's his game plan?
He literally, it's mind-boggling, and it's hard for people to understand. He's not asking for anything. He's not asking for money. He's not saying that I'm taking his money or anything. He's just he simply wants me to come back. That's what he tells people, that it's all a mistake and I'm going to come back. And he's smart. He's very smart. I know it sounds crazy and it sounds delusional but the problem is that he's also very smart. And he's smart enough to play the system.
Mm-hmm. And I take it you're not going back after 5 years of this, right? 6 years.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay, that's a very sad story. Whatever. Hopefully, Rabbi Kahn is an amazing. He's somebody really, just an incredible person. Maybe hopefully with where you have such an erlich person helping you, you'll have a good outcome.
Yeah, and I also really appeal.
And what's so sad? It's like for you, a successful outcome means where you just have the right to move on with your life. No child support from his trust fund, right? No child support from his trust fund. No alimony. Nothing. Just give me a get.
Yeah,
but
I made
because
an
of the
offer.
fact, what was your offer?
No, I made an offer already 2 years ago that, through Rabbi Kahn's Basin, that I was willing to accept a get and forego any child support. I'm not even asking for alimony. That's not even something that, I'm not even going there. And he refused.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's two things that I really, for myself personally, I really just appeal to the community to not sit by, not assume that divorce is, if someone's waiting for a get, don't just assume it's because she's trying to ask for money. I know a lot of people do, and I know there are a lot of messy divorces, but, it's not all that way. And anyone who's waiting for a get for a few years is just, I haven't met a woman who's just fighting for no reason, So, and I know definitely in my case, I feel like, his family, they're just going on every day with their daily lives, and like
the mother's a mechaneches, right?
She's a teacher. She's a teacher, but she's well respected. She's there for many years. And his siblings also, like, they go to shul and their kids go to school and they have businesses and people work with them, and it's just on a regular basis. I don't think anyone really questions them about what's going on with their brother. And to me, I don't think a week should go by that they shouldn't be questioned. And I feel that the community really allows it to happen. I know it sounds like I'm bitter, and I know it sounds like it's a tough call, but
doesn't sound like you're bitter. You just want to move on with your life.
Yeah, that's the truth. Because if every Rav and every person, stood up and said, we're not going to let this happen, it wouldn't be able to happen. I cannot imagine that there's not a way for our community to put pressure on this family in a way that they would realize, like, oh my gosh, like, okay, right, let's tackle this, let's do the best we can. Let's work with Rabbi Kahn. Let's work with, Rabbanim. What could we do? How could we spend enough time with our brother? It's their brother. Like, I'm not going to tell them what to do to him, but like, come on, figure it out, and work with Rabbi Kahn, work with the Rav, work with the Dayan, work with somebody, and I feel like, us as community members, we kind of just let them go on with their daily lives and without holding them accountable. That's the first thing. And the second thing, I really, after going through this, I've realized that it's such a big problem in our community, and it can't really be that we would have to be a bunch of fools to let this keep happening, and signing a prenup or a postnup, I think, is the only way to go. And I know that Rabbi Kahn's prenup and postnup that he has is, one very highly acceptable. And I think that it's really up to Rabbanim in every single community to sign it themselves and have their community members sign it. I think Rabbi Kahn did that last Pesach. He's a rabbin of a shul in New City, and he signed it, and he had the people in the shul sign it. And I would wish and hope that every Rav can do that in their community. I think that nobody, things happen just like people die in car crashes. Like, crazy things do happen, and people shouldn't say like, oh no, like, we're so happy, we're so perfect. Like, I hope you are, but if someone in your family, there's a certain percentage of people who are going to get divorced, and the best way to ensure a smooth process and to make sure that you're handled by a competent Bais Din, and to make sure that don't end up out $100,000 out is
that how much you spent so far?
I don't know. I don't even know how much we spent. Besides for the money, our family is just, we all spend. So my brother, he just spends hours and hours and hours of his time helping me. We're always traveling, always, got to go to Lakewood, got to go to Muncie, just always hopping in the car and, taking time for this. And we spent thousands of dollars that we can't afford, and we've had to turn to the community for help, and and signing a prenup or a postnup, I think, and and I think Rabbanim and therapists, marriage therapists, are really the ones who should take the responsibility of getting this done in the yeshiva community.
Thank you very much, Esther Nechama. We appreciate your time. We're going to try to reach out to, you said it was Bais Rachel of Muncie, and see if we can get their principal on the phone to ask him, or how does somebody like this be mechanech Jewish children? That's what we want to find out.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
That's a great question. Thank you.
All the best.
Thank
Take care.
Bye-bye. Take
Bye-bye.
care.